So I made an origami box. It's 2 pieces, bottom and top.
She's not doing a...
Can you guys hear me?
You went away, you come back again. Now you're back. Okay.
Yep.
Show me what you've got.
So I have an origami box with a lid and a bottom. They're both, and so it's constructed from silk paper and sticky tape, and it's 2 pieces of paper, both the same size. They were both A4 size paper, but one is folded slightly wider than the other one, and by slightly wider I mean the width of my index finger. Because
how did you work that out? Where'd you get your information?
I went through a process of searching the internet for origami boxes, and the first one I found was the instructions were convoluted. They looked simple, but when I started to do it, I realized the mathematics didn't work. So I went back and searched again, found a simple site with diagrams, and the suggestion on there was to widen this fold on the inside. You can see that's a little bit wider than this one.
Yep.
To create. But I used my finger because I was inspired to use my finger rather than to measure it.
Okay. All right. So you've obviously got some kind of spatial awareness that between your synapses and your finger, yes?
Yes, correct.
All right, cool. Next person.
I can go next.
Yep.
Because I've done this with you last time, I went to Bunnings last time and got all the bits, etc. I couldn't do that next, we're in lockdown, but it's a shoebox, so I had to make most of what I've got, but it's a textured wallpaper.
It's not a shoebox, it's your box.
No, it's yes, true.
Okay,
true.
it is a box.
Yes. It is a box, and it's got the textured wallpaper, so it's bamboo. I don't know if can you see that there? And there's some I don't know what to call that. I had some cord that I could glue on there like that. So it doesn't have any hinges or latches as such, or, you know, like I said, last time I had all that in place. So I was frustrated because I didn't have the materials I wanted to make what I wanted to make.
All right, so next person. Thanks, Katina. Next person. Here you come.
Oh.
Ah, Charity, you made it. Cool. Okay, let me see your box. Tell me all about it.
Okay. Oops, my screen's not. Okay, so I went for a bushwalk.
It says your bandwidth is very low. That's okay. That doesn't matter. It's still working. Okay, so talk me through it.
That's Humpty Doo. I went for a bushwalk in the morning afterwards, and the concept of the box came to me in that bushwalk. It just to use my bookbinding skills that I'd learned as a young teenager. And
I'm going to interrupt you here just for a moment because I find this interesting. So that as you're walking through the bush, information that you have had almost discarded or completely rose itself up to the surface, did it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Keep going.
Yeah. And I do, so I guess it came to the surface, and I saw the box as to use, like, that's how I got the idea how to use a book cover, like an old book cover, and recycle that into a box. So I wrote down all the process that I needed to do.
Can you read it out to me, please, darling?
Go fabric, glue, Stanley knife, ruler, template, boning, old book, and look for Granny's fabric from 1937.
Okay, can you hold that? Just stay where you are for the moment. Everybody in the background?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody listening to this particular moment?
Yeah.
Not necessarily wanting to just focus on this moment, but this moment is very, very important because what's happened, first of all, is you can hear the dot on the piece of paper event. You can hear the list, yes? So where that's occurring is between Atziluth and Assiah. Before we get on to Yetzirah, we're still in the place between a place that's not a place between Atziluth and Bariah. Do you remember your notes of last week? Yes. So from nothing, even when, if I can utilize you as an example, Shayoti, that would be handy just for the moment, if you don't mind being an object. So that you've started your bushwalk and you haven't known, but there's been an awareness that you maybe wanted to know. Yes. Would the awareness of maybe wanting to know have been there since the delegation of the homework last week? For everybody? Yeah, probably. Okay. So then with the bushwalk has come the idea, and from the idea have come this list of things. Yes. Are you following me, everybody?
Yep.
Everybody who didn't go through this process? Jolly good. So, okay, you've got the list. Then what happened? You've got the things that you've accumulated. Then what happened?
So I went to the op shop and stood outside and went, the first book that my eyes lie upon with a hardcover is the book that I'm going to get. And so I walked in, and the first book was a book on Scotland. That was like the only one on the shelf. And when I opened up the cover, it was it had a tartan on the inner cover, which is the tartan that my grandma got buried in. So I was like, well, that's meant to be. And there was some unlocking of family history recently as well. So, you know, when I was like, I'm going to make a box, it's going to be for the cards, is what my intention was. I didn't say that before. So then I came home and my next notes. So then I came home and I had like an hour and a half of time. It was like 39 degrees, 100% humidity. I was in my husband's shed with really loud heavy metal music playing and a fan blowing in my face. And it just, I was impatient. And I was slicing away at the cover, and I made a template before that, actually. I pulled apart a box and made a template with measurements and stuff.
Okay, so that's entering into the realm of between Yetzirah and Assiah, isn't it, that template?
Yep.
Did everybody take note of that information? All right, cool. Did you have a problem between Yetzirah and Assiah, between your template and the creation of the box person? Did you encounter any difficulties?
Yes, I did. My my idea of scoring the book and being able to fold it up just completely failed and it just tore and fell apart, and my Stanley knife went straight through it, and it just didn't work. And I said to myself, okay, you're trying to squeeze it in, you're really impatient, you're really uncomfortable, you're sweaty, you're not an environment that's conducive to what you're trying to manifest. So put it away and come back to it when you've got some more time. So then I came back to it a few days later and decided to scrap the book cover board, because I thought that would be good because it's so strong as opposed to normal cardboard. But then I went to, we've got like recycled cardboard in the shed. So I just grabbed a box and decided to use a box instead and use the end paper that was from the book so that I could still retain that book. Because
May I ask what you did with the pages of the book?
I've still got them. But I've got the end paper. The end paper's on the inside of the box now.
Okay, yep. All right, so thank you. Let's get on to the next person.
Yeah, cool.
We'll hang on to that information because I must say that Shayoti, you've just fulfilled the criteria. Thank you. Next person.
Okay, I'll go. So can you see?
No, just lift it up a little bit. Okay, well, it's like dinner.
Yes, it is. The bounty of nature. So basically what I thought, initially I got over complicated with, I didn't really understand what you'd asked me to make. And then I posted to Facebook. I thought it was the other way around. I thought we kept a journal and then turned that into a box.
Oh, was that you? So that was like, what part of make a box didn't you get?
Exactly. And then I got overcomplicated. I went all Kabbalistic on it. And then I remembered the dot. So I thought, you know what, just make a fucking box.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know, I'm not really a maker. So I thought, I don't want to make anything that's going to have to sit around in my house or I'll have to dump it.
I just want you to remember that little expression you just said. Does everybody hear that expression? I'm not really a maker. Have you put that underlined in your notebook, please?
Yep.
Just underline it. Because I'm going to get you to consider that.
So
that's your only point of extreme hubris. Well, so danger. That's your only point of extreme hubris.
okay.
Just come back to that later. Okay. So
yeah. By that I actually mean that I don't my physical.
You don't need to justify it. It's
Yep.
the fact that you said it was interesting.
Yes.
Yes.
But I'm very creative. Anyway, so I then
So
was
if you're
like,
not a maker and yet you're creative.
I'm talking about physical practical skills anyway. Maybe let's not get lost on that. So I then
Don't you interrupt me once. Don't you dare. I'm trying to work on you. I'm trying to work with you here. And you just automatically went into defense mode. So please don't do that. Okay.
Yep.
If you're a creative and you say you're not a maker, and at the same time, do you grow hair out of your head?
Yes.
Then you're a maker. Okay. It's really important. And then you say you're creative, but if you're creative and yet you consider yourself not a maker, can you hear how that's an oxymoron?
Sort of. They have different meanings for me.
This is interesting because this is what we have to get to at some stage. It's not about you. None of this is going to be about any of us. Do you get me? It's really important to forget that side of it. Okay, in this. At this stage in time, to remain as blank as you possibly can, to realize things that you may not have realized before the exercise is what the exercise is about. Yes? Because what actually can happen is our synapses can become really fixed and quite rigid. And if you get a chance to anybody to read a book called The Brain That Changes Itself, please do so. It's about brain plasticity. And it's a really important book. For the moment. Okay, so next phase, what did you do with your mathematics?
Well, I decided I wanted to make a cube because that seemed like it would be the easy way to go in terms of the maths. I also wanted to use basically fabrics and materials that I had around. And I also didn't want to actually end up with anything at the end. So the idea was I'd build something out of cardboard, use all organic materials from the garden, and then bury it afterwards. So in terms of the cube,
You're gonna put a dead person in the box before
sorry?
you bury them.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in the box.
Okay.
No dead people. No dead people. So in terms of the maths, I figured I would just do like a crucifix shape. So square.
It's called cruciform.
Cruciform.
Yes.
So yeah, so two, one in the middle, and then the extra one on the bottom. Yep. So that would actually get around the hinges.
It's called the cube of the magicians, by the way, because it's based on the traditional shape of Kabbalah. Just so that you got that as information regarding that cube shape. Because when you undo the cube shape, you've got the cruciform shape. Last week I showed you, I showed you one of the diagrams that was associated with the Otzim, which was this shape. Remember that? That showing?
Oh, the 10.
So that's a cube. That's a cube. Danger. That is a cube. Did you see that?
Ah, at the top.
No, the whole thing's a cube.
Oh, okay. I don't really see that.
I'm going to see if I can drop something in the side aisle. Just see something here. Let me just see if I can find it. No, I won't because I've got rid of it. doesn't matter. It is that shape that I showed you. Is it anybody, can anybody see that, or is it just really fucking annoying?
We could Google it. Does
Too
it have
bright.
any?
It's too
No, I
washed
don't want you to
out.
Google it. I don't want you to Google it. It could be the light. Could
Yeah,
you-
it's a bit washed out.
yeah, hang on a second. I'm just done. Yeah, but what about that?
Better.
Just
Yeah,
about.
that's
Yep,
better.
yep.
Yeah.
I just want you to be aware. You can step it on. Just be aware of the fact that that is a cube shape that I'm showing you here. And
Yep.
so it's really interesting that you've chosen a cube shape because, and you understand that the cube shape is based on a cruciform shape. And you can see that shape. So before we were dealing with this design. Okay.
Yes.
And then I had you make a box, and the fact that you've made a cube shape or a cruciform shape is, the cube is this design. So you can see what up here, this is the triangle, the three dots, the three.
I make it darker.
My colleague is making it darker.
Thank you, Nashka.
Okay, so with this tree of life shape, if I could get to Lisa's design of wood, don't know where to put it. I'm trying to not use anything that you're going to pull from online. The top shape of a cube is called, have you got a pen and paper there, Danger? You're going to need it.
Yep.
Top shape of a cube in a cruciform shape is called a neshama, N-E-S-C-H-A-M-A-H. The whole body of the cube, which would be the pieces that come across in the middle and the central two, will be in, except for the very lid of your box, the lid of your cube will be, the whole central theme of it is called ruach, R-U-A-C-H. And the very lid, when you, the last particular, thank you. This should work a bit better. There you go. These, thank you very much. That those three at the top is called the neshama. All of those in the center are called the ruach. And that bit at the bottom, that's actually, if you'd folded the cube shape over, your lid would be this bit here, which is called nefesh, N-E-P-H-E-S-H.
Yep.
So that if I was to fold this shape up, this actually is called the cube of the magicians. Yeah. Okay. Just.
Yep.
But if you can carry on there and we can go from there. So you've made your cube shape. Okay. Did anything give you difficulty?
Yes, I was figuring how the lid would go in and not need any kind of, because I'm going to put it in the ground, I didn't want to use any glues or anything like that. So I thought I'd tie it around with twine, but then I didn't realize that the lid would need to kind of go in. So I put a couple of little tabs on the side, but I forgot to put one on the end. So that kind of was a bit of a mistake.
Okay.
But I fixed it by putting a rock on the top.
So you had to do the mathematics in the first place to get the shape?
Not really, no. I could just see it in my head, and I knew that if those squares were all the same size.
Could that have to do with a lifetime's worth of looking at spatial reality?
I'm a software developer, so it's kind of a similar process when I kind of plan stuff.
Yeah, I didn't
Like,
need to know what you do for a living. I'm just more interested in whether or not it had to do with stored spatial reality. Yeah?
possibly, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Thank you. Next person. Come on, we've got a long way to go before we
Hey,
get on.
Lily, it's me, Lily. I thought I'll just go.
Hi,
I'll
Lily.
be honest, I didn't make the box.
You didn't make the box?
No, however, I'll tell you the process of my thinking and how I got stuck. And to be honest, I probably was in my own mind too much. So last week when you said to make a box as part of our assignment, I was like, okay, that's easy. It's a box. It's square. As you said, we see boxes all the time. And then as the week progressed, I started to thinking, oh, what's the definition of a box? And then I went, well, why is boxes square? Then I thought shapes of boxes. Then I thought, well, why can't a box be round? And why can't a box be whatever else? And then I started looking at my, I guess, environment. And I went, well, we live in a box because, you know, every room's like in the home that I live in is square. And I'm like, okay, so and I looked at, then I started thinking about all the repetition of square boxes, and I looked around the house and I realized I'm a hoarder of boxes, and I have boxes everywhere. So, and especially I love boxes that look like this with the, flap and everything else. And then, yeah, so then I thought, okay, and then I sort of, my mind went off and went, why do we use boxes? What do I store in my boxes? And then, yeah, I got stuck.
Okay, cool. That's interesting that you got stuck. Thank you. Next person.
Mine's
Oh,
kind of, sorry, Victoria. Mine's kind of like a unusual type box. I have some crates, and I can't show you the box because I made a garden bed, because I sit, when I'm doing my call, I sit in front of a window, and I thought that would make a good flower garden, just a raised flower garden. So I put some crates together, only using really nails and tape measure to make sure it was aligned. But
Where'd you get that information regarding the alignment?
I'd seen boxes before, and like crate boxes before, and I just I suppose I just made it balanced because I do a little bit of handiwork in the house. So
So
I
it was
just-
not possible that you explored mathematics to get where you were going.
I did, because I had to make sure the measurements were the
Thank
same.
you. Thank you. Okay. Did anything go wrong?
Well, probably not as level as I would have liked, but not really. The crates are almost half done anyway. You got to take a few pails off and then put it together.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Next person.
Hi, Laura. This is my black card box. It is not the box that I'd planned, but it's a box. I made it from black card. It opens and
Did you make
closes.
it?
Pardon?
Did you make it?
I did. Yeah, I followed along with a YouTube video, and my little boy stuck some gold things on the top because he really wanted to be involved. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's again, like a lot of other people, I sort of got stuck in my head and spent a lot of time panicking about making a box and very little time actually making a box. And I sort of caught on to that fact really early. And yeah, had some interesting epiphanies about myself through the week, just as a result of this box.
Okay.
Which
Thank you.
point.
Right. Next person.
I'm happy to go ahead.
Yep. Got you,
Yep.
Catherine. Yep.
Okay. The process I thought was really interesting because I did initially have like a physical reaction when you asked me to make a box, or asked us to make a box. And I had.
Can you take me through your body parts?
Beg your pardon?
Can you show me which
through
body
my.
part?
Can I? Yeah. So I felt it in my chest, in my gut, and in my hands. I felt really. It was like a rush, but I felt it was anxiety too, because I thought.
It's interesting how you named it when you probably. It's interesting to stick with a body reaction without naming it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Because when you name it, you could be naming it by way of somebody else's opinion of what that physical sensation is.
Sure.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so you've had a bacterial or biological effect.
Totally. Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
And then I was sort of walking around the house and thinking, how am I going to make a box? What kind of box? Just make a box, just make a fucking box, Kate. So it was in my head all week, like for about 4 days. And I was talking to my husband. I said, I've got to make a box. And he's like, well, it's really simple. Just make a fucking box. And I was like, yeah, okay. And what kind of box do I like? All that sort of stuff came through my head. And then that whole week, all these boxes were arriving at the front door, all parcels that I'd bought online. So all these boxes were coming to the front door, and I thought, I can go cardboard, I could do this. And I sat with it and I thought, I'm just going to calm down because I was all in my head. And then I was talking to the girls at work and I was talking about the box, and then it became a joke about this. Kate, you're going to make this fucking box. When are you going to make this box? And then I was talking again with my husband, and he's like, mate, what are you going to make it out of? And I said, oh, I'd probably like to do something out of paper. So I'm visualizing all these different things. And then he's like,
we're still, interestingly enough, between Atziluth and Assiah at this stage in time. There's nothing struck the concept of Yetzirah yet, except your body.
Yeah, right.
Which was at the very beginning. You had a Malkut, you had an Assiah effect.
Yes. Yeah.
And that could also be the equivalent of your box. Yes? Do you understand what I mean? Okay. Yeah. A mutuality, a reciprocity between yourself and the desired outcome. Okay. I'm not fucking with your minds, people. It's just like the dot of the piece of paper. This is significant. Okay. So then what happened?
So I felt like I spent a lot of time there, and then I felt I sat down.
Where's there?
Oh, just in my head. And
so nowhere.
Nowhere.
Thank you.
Guess. And then I sat down with my husband, who is a builder, and he said, why don't you use me as your information? I can give you a whole heap of information about how to do this.
So you met the guide in the Forest Sauvage.
Yes. So what it is?
Can anybody hear that? Okay, this particular person here in the centre met the guardian of the bridge, so to speak, or the guide of the Forest Sauvage. Quite often the guides of the Forest Sauvage are in Bunnings. They're the person who will direct you to an aisle. Okay, please keep going, very quick, very briefly.
Yeah, then we had some stuff downstairs because then we've got a shed downstairs. So I went and thought, okay, well, I don't want to buy anything, so I'll use what we have around us. And we had some beautiful rosewood sitting under the house, and I really love rosewood. And so I sort of drew an idea. We sat down and had a discussion about it, and then I drew an idea out, and I've got it all here. And then we talked about measurements. And making the wood had to sort of by the measurements that was going to dictate the size of the box that I was going to make by what we had available. I did do a Bunnings trip and race down and grab some brass hinges, but I had all the tools there. So I had the sanding tools and I had the everything that we needed in order for me to make a box. And my husband was quite keen on making the box for me.
He's naughty, isn't he? And we could almost call him a demiurge.
But I was really quite insistent that I was just show me and I can do this. So, and in fact, it brought the neighbours over because they're like, what the fuck is Kate doing downstairs making a box? So it was really interesting. So I did end up making a box.
Okay, so your box is an extrovert requiring an audience.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting, isn't it? So, okay.
Then I wrote down the process.
Yeah, just pretty much talk to me through it, but there's individual one. During the week, I can get people to contact me with their processes in doc form because that's very significant. Next person. Thank you, Catherine.
Could I go next?
Yeah.
Okay, this exercise has been very interesting to me. Until people started showing their boxes, it didn't even occur to me that I could have made a physical box. Also, I had I just got sick all week. I had a very strong physical reaction, and I've spent so much time in physical pain. And I didn't connect it to it was related to this. But I felt so afraid. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what make a box means. I will do it wrong. Law will kick me out of the tarot course. All this kind of catastrophizing and this constant thinking of what is making a box. I don't know what it means. What does it mean? And then in this loop, I was stuck. And then just before we were going to jump on a call, I started to write some notes to myself. And then that's the box I made.
You didn't make a box.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it didn't even occur to me that we're talking about a real box.
Okay, so you're still in a space of Assiah. You've come a little bit close to Yetzirah. and you've come close to manifestation, but you haven't got into a place of manifestation. Okay. What you've done is almost last week when we talked about light being both particle and wave, what you've done by drawing the box of the rectangular shape is you've partially collapsed the wave, but you haven't fully collapsed the wave. You with me? Into manifestation. Okay, cool. Next person.
I'll go. Okay, so that's my box.
Okay. Yes.
Once I got over the mental hurdle of deciding it didn't need to be a metaphorical box, but just a box, I thought about what sort of box I wanted, and I knew I wanted something that was small and simple, that felt good to hold. So I looked around my house and I found a box which met that criteria. And then I decided I would use that design to replicate it. So
you've replicated a box already in existence. So you've kind of cloned a box. Is that correct?
I would have used the box as inspiration. I would, because it didn't end up being exactly the same, but it wasn't a straight up clone. It wasn't like Dolly the sheep. I promise. So anyway, so then I then wanted to just use materials that I had in my house, and so I then made it out of just 4 pieces of materials: card, paper, scissors, and tape is what I used to do it. I used.
Did you need to get some mathematics together to make certain that it all folded in neatly, or did you have to clean that up after?
No, I didn't use any mathematics. I more referenced the first box as a guide to follow to make my box, which ended up being different. I made it slightly different, but I used that as the basis for it.
Okay, what did you do with the leftovers?
The leftover materials?
Yes.
I kept them.
You kept them. Can you define for me the leftover material?
Well, there was a large piece of cut board.
Yep.
So I just cut what I needed, and I've kept that. And I've kept the roll of paper. I discarded the scraps from the sides.
Okay, so that's interesting. So those extra bits have decided not to be boxed.
Say that again.
Those extra bits have decided not to be boxed.
Well, yeah, I guess I had more materials than I needed.
Next person.
I only took what I needed to make a box.
That's it's irrelevant. The pieces left over have decided not to be boxed.
Okay.
Next person.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Luna. So take me through the process.
Okay, so when you first said that we were gonna make a box, I'm like, yes, I have the perfect idea. I'm gonna get heaps of sticks. I'm gonna get these tools like glue gun. And
At that stage you're only thinking? At that stage you're thinking? See, between Atziluth and Assiah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm thinking I'm gonna do this, and I had the image so clearly. And then before I went to gather the sticks, because I didn't want to gather the sticks to then bring them home to then not have a purpose to use them, I went to search for my glue gun and I couldn't find it. And I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to change it.
That's interesting. Did you make a note of that?
Yeah.
The glue guns run away from home?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anybody hearing some of the little bits and pieces that I'm saying, they actually matter. All right, you may not necessarily, it's not obvious. Keep going, Luna, please.
So I was like, should I go to the shops and get it? And I'm like, okay, no, what do I have here that I can just start right now doing it? And I had raffia, which is this.
Yep.
And I know how to make baskets, but I thought I'm just gonna make something and then put a lid on it. So this is it. Right. My little kind of wonky box, and I'm still making the lid, so it should go. Oops.
Oh, interesting. So the lid's taking its time. So you have manifested, you have
Yeah.
entered into Assiah, and the lid is a personality on it on their own. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Interesting. So I'm fascinated with the glue gun. Cool. You couldn't have done this with a glue gun, could you?
No, I thought maybe I can use just like vine or even the raffia. I was like, oh, I'll just go with the raffia. I'm like, it's gonna fall all off. So
What tool did you end up using to do the weaving?
I just used this needle and just a raffia, so there is no leftover.
That needle, that blue needle.
Yeah.
Where did you already have that?
Yeah, I did.
So when did you score the blue needle?
Oh, it was quite some time ago. Probably like 8 months ago.
Irrelevant.
Yeah.
When did you score the blue needle?
When did I?
When you were living in the proximity that you're living in now. So where was the blue needle person?
Oh.
When they found you.
Oh, okay. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah, someone gave it to me actually.
Oh, who was the person who gave it to you, and why did they give it to you?
Because she was teaching me how to do this.
Okay.
And she said, you can just keep that one.
So somebody of significance in Assiah,
yeah,
passed on an object.
Yeah.
That then neither of you necessarily knew that it was going to be significance to this. So that object has basically a very royal place in their own right. Okay.
And when I was looking for this, I thought about using another needle, which wasn't going to help because I need exactly this size. And I ended up finding it. I'm like, yes, that's the one I need.
All right. Thank you. Next person.
Yeah, thanks.
Come on.
I'll go.
Okay.
Okay. So as soon as you said make a box, there were probably 3 thoughts that came pretty quickly into my head. The first being, oh, I don't have tools and I can't go to Bunnings. What am I going to do? And then I thought, I'll make.
Your first response was almost the reverse of movement. Almost the reverse of expansion from nothing to something. So you almost aborted the expansion in the realm between Atziluth and Assiah. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Then I had the thought of, I'll get some DAS.
Curious, have you ever miscarried a baby?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can you keep going?
And yes, so I thought I'll use some DAS and I'll make a little square clay DAS box with a lid. And then I read somewhere on your post, I think, that it couldn't be a jar. And then I started wondering if DAS might constitute a jar. So I needed to reevaluate that. And I was in the newsagent getting some work done. This is the day after on the Monday. And I was looking at the DAS as I walked past. And then straight after that, I saw something else on the shelf and went, I reckon I could make a box out of that. So it was a very impromptu type of a decision. And I grabbed the pop sticks and I made the box out of those. And it does have a lid, but I haven't affixed it. I haven't decided whether I will or whether I won't. And I do remember thinking when I looked at these, they're all pretty much the same length. I can do 6 sides. And I did actually think cube, knowing that I wouldn't need to cut and use too many tools to do it. So I bought the sticks and I bought the craft glue and took it home and sat out on the porch and got my Kinder vibes going on and started sticking them together. So these are double-sided for stability, and that one goes one way and the opposite side is glued the other way. And
okay. Did anything not work for you?
A lot of things didn't work along the way. At the time that I decided I would make the box from these sticks, I didn't know how I would actually get them to adhere together. So that was a little bit of a thinking process. And it also became quite a sticky mess. And I realized I had to do it in stages so that the glue of everything could dry, because I just couldn't do it all at once. And then trying to work out whether to do the sides first or whether to adhere everything from the bottom up was an issue as well. So that took a bit of experimentation and a bit of support, propping things up and using pegs. In the end, I decided to put all 4 sides together first so that they were somewhat stable and adhere it from the bottom up. That presented its own problems.
Okay, because
so
I'm understanding that because that need for stability is very strong in you. Okay, let's move on to the next person. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll go next. And I don't have a box.
Why?
I tried to have a box. So you gave us the assignment and I thought, make a box. Okay, well, you weren't, you know, you didn't give us any real clues there, but I immediately thought paper, something out of cardboard, decorative though. And then you posted your wooden boxes and I went, fuck, I can't do it out of paper. But all my tools would burn up in the barn fire. So I didn't want to have to buy a bunch of tools. Talk to the neighbor. Do you have a table saw? Well, my husband does, but it's at work and he could bring it home. No, I'm not going to do all that. So I went back to the paper idea. I went online because I was, pardon the pun, was not ready to think out of the box after a week of vertigo. Came up with design plans. Cut all my templates together, had an absolute meltdown on glue and things that wouldn't stick together. And I said, the hell with it, because I'm talking like a pirate right now and I need to walk away.
we've just copped you because you said the hell with.
Ah. And I can't say
So
that.
everything you've just said, you've created a dysfunction for yourself by utilizing, almost by ignoring the information from week 1, by just saying the hell with. So you used a religious terminology into this frustration in connection with the box.
I
Interesting.
just knew it was time to walk away when I was getting more glue on me.
Oh,
than the
that's
project
irrelevant to
was.
this. That's irrelevant to this. Okay. Thank you, darling.
Mhm.
Next one.
I can go. Yeah. So like I was thinking about it at the start of the week and I was like, I want to make a useful box, like a really something that I can actually use. So then I was watching videos on how to make a wooden box. Then I realized that I do not own any of these tools that I need. And all the stores are closed in Melbourne. Anyway, so then I was thinking, okay, I've got these hollow book things that work well as boxes. So I'll just make one of those out of a book that I don't use. So, and I started doing that, but I still want to make a good quality, like fucking, I don't know. I didn't, oh, sorry, mine's that word. I shouldn't have said that, but yeah, I don't know. Like it's pretty shit. And yeah, I decided I'm my own authority and like, I can make a really good quality box if I just give myself a couple more days because yeah, this week's been insane. And I know I shouldn't have excuses, but yeah.
It is an excuse just the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, next person.
All right. Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, great. I made a box. This is my box, and it's got 2 parts, a top and a bottom. When you said make a box, I was a little shocked. My son had just come home the day before with a box he had made out of wood. He'd never made a box before. And I was like, does this count? No. So, but it made me think, well, maybe.
You could have conned your son out of the box and saved yourself a lot of drama. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
You could have paid him for the box and then you would have had a box. We still would have been working from Atziluth to Assiah.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I'm just making a suggestion. Anyway, please keep going.
It's actually quite a special box. I didn't want to ask him for the box. It's his
box.
Well,
we'll talk about special boxes over the next 20,000 years, shall we? We'll try and work out what's special in the next millennia or two. Keep going.
Well, I enjoy folding paper immensely, so I thought I would try to fold a box that I hadn't ever made before, which was rectangular rather than square or hexagonal or star shaped.
You know it's the exact same shape of it as a brick? Did you notice?
It does look brick-like. It's quite sturdy. as well. I that was one of my things that I was thinking origami paper is quite flimsy, and I actually wanted to make something with some integrity. So interesting that you'd mentioned brick. And it was, so I looked up a tutorial on YouTube and I found one I liked. And then I went into my paper stash in the garage and I opened a box.
Hang on, between the tutorial on YouTube and you deciding you liked that, did you have to write anything down or get anything printed out?
I wrote down I wrote down things in my journal because I journaled all of this really pretty well. Found a tutorial for origami that looks interesting. Gonna give it a go. Excited.
Have you got your mathematics there? On the page, not in your brain?
No, it wasn't until I sat down with the paper because I wanted to look at the materials before I just, knew what size. And
What
it was
the template?
I mean, it's origami, so I needed a square, and I had a rectangular piece of paper. So I had to turn the rectangle into a square by folding it in half, and I did that by matching the straight edges and creasing it. And then usually with thinner paper, I just lick it and tear it. But with this one, I used a pair of scissors.
Anything go wrong?
Oh, yeah. It was because I had to make two and one had to be slightly smaller than the other.
It's interesting you use the word had to twice in a row.
Well, I think I worried about the box while I was making it, that it was white and not pleasing for me to look at yet. And I wanted it to be sturdy as well. I wanted to have some structure.
Are we talking about your box or your son?
Ooh.
I know. Next person, please.
I'll go. Okay. So can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My box is not complete, but I have I don't know if you can see this. It's still in pieces, but I'll go through the process. So my first idea was to glue glitter to an existing box and varnish it until I found out that you didn't want us to do that specifically. So I was obsessing about the box, and I felt like I wasn't capable of making a wooden box. There was a lot of inattention and resistance.
I just want to put something in here which is really interesting. So there was an instruction, but the instruction wasn't about what I wanted. It
was about what you didn't want.
No.
The glitter on an existing box.
That was an example.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that was an example of what you didn't want.
It was an example of what I didn't want. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with what I wanted.
I was going to do.
It had nothing to do with what I wanted.
Okay.
Okay. I know it's semantics, but semantics
Okay.
matter.
All right. So I had really repetitive dreams and nightmares about the box.
Can we pause for a second? There's two people. Ari, can you see the problems with people getting in?
No, it's not that they're not in. It's just the chat. There's some chat about the Facebook group, but it's under control slowly.
Oh, thank you. Back again. Where are we? Back to Lee. Thank you, Ari.
So I had obsessive dreams about the box, and the next day I spoke to a friend about it, and
I'm interested.
Yeah, so she had an inspiration box for me. It was a small wooden box, and it was the perfect size to fit tarot cards, which is what I wanted to build. So I borrowed the box from my friend, and then I also spoke to my mum about the box. And she told me that she has wood from a silky oak tree that was cut down, sadly, from our property. And it had been curing under the house for a few years, and it was ready to be used. she also has a partner who has all of the tools that I would need. He has a power saw, an electric sander, and a glue gun. So I organized with him. The only day he could do it was yesterday. So I went to the house with my measurements and the inspiration box, and I got all of the tools ready and everything, and we began to make the box. And then he had to leave, and that was my issue that arose. We only got
We
part of
need to
the
work
way.
on that one, don't you?
Yeah.
Good. Next person, please. Come on.
Yep, I'll go.
Okay, thank you.
When you said the box, to make a box, I was like, oh, that's interesting, make a box. Anyway, I went underneath my house and I got my son to come in under the house with me because I knew there was old wood under there, and I went and had a look. I found some wood, but they were big, long pieces, and I was like, oh, I don't know how to deal with that. And then I was like, oh, maybe I could go to Bunnings and get them to cut it up. And then I was like, no, scrap that idea. And then I remembered I had a shoe box. So I got out the shoe box and I was like, well, I don't want to just do it directly from this shoe box. Maybe I'll cut another box out of that shoe box. And then I did that and I was like, no, I'm not happy with that idea. And then I remembered that my son had made this box at school. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll have a look at the box he made. And this is the box that he did at school with the lid that kind of went like that. I was like, oh, that's cool. Oh, I could say that was my box. But no, I thought, no, I can't do that. And then I ended up going to the $2 shop and I bought paper and made this box, a sparkly box. So measurement wise, I just used the A4 paper and then just started folding it in. I did cut 2 bits off on the side to make it a bit shorter.
What happened to the bits that you cut off?
They are in the bin. But just one more thing. Yes. I found this in a secondhand store. It's antique wallpaper. And so I wanted to add something with a bit of history, and I don't know anything about it. I just thought it was beautiful.
So the antique wallpaper.
Yeah.
Hang on to that thought. Okay,
Yeah.
because you said that you wanted
add
a bit of history.
Yeah.
This exercise was never about you.
Oh, okay.
It was never about anybody in the room.
But
next person.
Here's
Thanks,
my
Kristen.
box. I haven't been yet. It's a bit rustic. When I started thinking about how I would make it, well, initially I wasn't sure if it was going to be like a 2D box in my journal book that I would draw, or if I was going to actually make something 3-dimensional. So here it is. I was contemplating size, what I would use it for. Obviously wasn't sure the intended use for this, but I thought it'd be cool if it actually turned out nice and it could fit my tarot cards in there. So I thought I'm going to aim for something about that size, a bit bigger. I wanted to use things that were recycled. 1, because I didn't want to get new stuff, and 2, because lockdown, and I don't have any woodworking tools, so I thought I'm going to make it out of cardboard, and got a larger box that was ready to go out, and just sort of trace that up and cut it. Formed this. It's got a little hatch at the bottom.
You put your mouse in that.
I could catch someone. And then I thought it was a bit plain in color, and so it was kind of an organic process in terms of putting things on here. I had this, you can kind of see it's like a wood laminate looking contact paper around, so I leaned it up against it and made sure that it would be the right size and cut
Ever
it.
had body dysmorphia, Gabrielle?
No.
Okay, cool. Just curious.
And this paper I had around, which I stuck on, and this feather that I had before. I'm not sure what bird it's from, but I'd found it, and I just painted it with some gold. and stuck it on. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Next person.
I'll go.
Hello. Hi.
So it's quite exciting making a box. I love boxes, you know, especially the ones with the dovetails. So I'm like, get excited, think about this, that, start researching.
It's still between Atziluth and Assiah.
Start writing a list.
That's been between Assiah and Yetzirah. Okay. What's involved with your list?
Oh, this is the first list. So it just says Boxman. I have a box that a friend was disregarding that I really like, that I wanted to, you know, make one of the same, but a bit bigger. So I have this for my measurements and knowing that I want it bigger and like, but I really want those little dovetails, you know, where is it there?
Okay.
Anyway, so then I'm like, okay, so because, you know, we've got a couple of days. Well, I have. So I decided I will go and get wood from Bunnings because I can. So Bunnings and hinges, spoke to the lady who directed me to everywhere.
Who was the woman you spoke to?
I didn't get her name.
Ah, well, you see, that's important. Nobody magical is going to give you their names, not without a lot of coercion and perhaps a few spells. So they will remain sort of secretive, and you actually don't know who's possessing whose body with what form or what creature. Okay, so what did the creature person woman do for you?
She spoke to me about the marine ply. I took my cigar box in and told her what I need to make a box like this. This is what I want. Can you tell me where the marine ply is, the thicknesses? She took me and she said, well, the really nice stuff's outside, but that's really big. I'm like, no, too big. And then took me inside. I ended up getting like a 4 mil, like it's in the process. I had a little visit with Mullingarrow on my box making day, so I was interrupted.
Okay, can I also say something to you before we go much further? You're talking about the person in Bunnings. Can you use the pronoun they and them and their from now on instead of her and she?
Yes.
Just as an exercise in non-binary terminology?
Yes.
Okay, that's really important to your dialogue. If somebody that you know is choosing to have that pronoun for themselves, if you start reading for people who are of a different gender persuasion to you or to anybody else, for example, we don't know. And therefore it's actually polite to use the term they and them, unless some people specifically say I would prefer to be related to as he or she. Thank you. And everybody please needs to make the same notes.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, so I got 4 mil, really nice.
2 mil and 4 mil.
4 mil ply.
Both 4 mil. Okay, yep.
Yep. So then, as I said, I got interrupted. Someone turned up and, you know.
Oh, that's important.
I experienced.
Yes, very important. Did you diarise that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was a big doozy.
Okay, excellent.
Anyway, so then this morning I continued on with measuring, working it out. I've got a rusty old handsaw. I've got tools, bits and bobs. I did speak to my sons also earlier in the week because they made boxes. And then their answer was, we had lots of machines for those, Mum.
Okay, I'm just, before I go on to the next person, I'm interested in a couple of things. One of them is the fact that you mentioned it to your sons, and the other one is the fact that you called, and this is important, you called a saw a rusty old person.
Yes, he is.
They are. It is.
He's a
okay,
mystery.
so what's interesting is that as part of the quest, this is just a mention. It would have been worthy, perhaps, to have understood the saw.
Oh.
And that the saw needed to be remembered for their grace and their greatness.
Yes, that happens.
Rather than be left to being considered rusty and old.
Well, it happens when I'm in the motion using it. And then I start having dialogue with the saw, with the wood, with the crate thing I'm using as a table and how I'm standing.
Thank you. Next person.
Thank you.
I'll go,
Anybody
Law.
else? Yep.
So I thought it was very interesting. So the process that I went through, I thought about the type of box that would like to be made, really. And I then started researching different attachments like the box clasps and the corners that, you know, you put on the boxes. And then I checked out if the hardware store was open so I could go and acquire the things that needed to be acquired. So I had a box at home that I liked the look of, and I was like, something like this would be great. So I went into the Bunnings. It's always Bunnings, isn't it? And yeah, I went into Bunnings and I went down to the trade section, and I consciously remember looking around and waiting for it all happened quite quickly, but waiting for the person that I wanted to ask, basically. It wasn't going to be just anyone. For some reason, I needed to find the person that I wanted to ask, and that happened quite quickly. So I went up to the person and I said what I needed, which was some wood, and can they show me where the wood was? Because I wanted to make, well, it wanted to be made out of wood. So I then went and had the measurements that needed to be, you know, cut into place, which was around 20.
Where did you get the measurements from?
So the box that I have at home is roughly the size that wanted to be made again. So I was like, it's going to be 20.
What did you use to measure it?
There's tape, measuring tape.
Measuring tape. Okay,
Yeah.
and then you wrote down the measurement?
No, I didn't. I took the box with me to Bunnings.
So you were relying on somebody else's measuring tape to get you the correct equipment?
No, I wasn't relying on, but I knew that I couldn't cut it myself because I didn't have the cutting equipment.
You're still relying on somebody else to get the measurements from the box that you had in your hand, like a supplicant. You've gone to the bishop and you've said, can you please mark me with oil and give me my confirmation? Is that sort of a little bit like it?
No, it wasn't, but that would be fun. So anyway, the pieces of wood were cut, and I learned some things along the way which were interesting that I hadn't thought of before, which was about, you know, because here's the box here and the lid. By the way, this is a box in progress. It's not finished yet, and I feel like it's going to take a while before that eventually finishes, because the idea of what I have is continually changing.
Can I interrupt you? When does the thing finish?
Well, I don't know yet.
Even when you think the box is finished, what makes you think that's the box's destiny to remain in that shape? I mean, can you consider what in the idea of 2000 revolutions of this earth around the sun, that box person might end up being other?
Totally.
Okay, thank you. Keep going.
Yeah. So this is box so far, and I got some oil, what's it called? The oil stainer, and I chose the color that the box would like to be. And then I learned that also the oil stainer comes off in your hand. So then I had to go back to Bunnings and get the lacquer type substance that you put over the top to stop it coming off in your hands, because I didn't know that. So that hasn't happened yet, but I also have all the clasps, and I chose the color of the clasps. You know, I thought about it. Does it want to be silver finishings or gold? And I've really thought about these things. And also the lining of the box. I thought that I have some of my son's clothes that don't fit him anymore. And I was like, it'd be nice to, you know, utilize some of the clothes that didn't just want to throw them out or whatever, that it'd be nice to line the box with these and have something special for the box.
Interesting. Thank you, Murray. Next person.
I'll go.
Somebody, yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Right.
Okay, so prelude. I may or may not get my ass kicked for this, because as of right now, I wasn't aware that there were prerequisites to this project. So I just ran with it. This week has been interesting. I've been on the road. I had a friend come in from out of town. And
No, just the box.
I know, I'm getting there. So
Okay.
he brought me my box that was, I didn't know he was bringing it, so that's nice. It's one of my favorites. And my box as of right now is this.
It's theoretical.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Next person. Come on.
It's probably me, is it? I think everyone else is gone.
Hello.
Hi. So, well, let's see. I made a decision when the assignment was set that I was going to work outside of the box, which was my first process.
Fucking smart.
So, well, you know, I've made a few boxes now, so I just wanted to sort of check, like, about what could happen and take it a little further in myself. So I made a decision that I was going to procure a box magically, and I really left that open as to how that was going to occur. One thing that happened when I made that decision is that I got this imagery of like this postal kind of like cardboard box. And I was like, that's not what I want, but it was there as an image. So I noted that. So there's a tiny bit of a story with this that is kind of involved in the whole thing. That is, I had a dream probably about 4 months ago. And in the dream, I needed something really magical to happen. And I was with my magic twin in the dream, and I cut a door inside of a house with a knife. And in this doorway opened to a vault in this dream. And I was like, I need a tool. And this motorbike came flying out of the vault. And then I had my twin with me. I was like, I need another one. So we had 2 motorbikes come out of this vault. And then I wasn't super happy with how the motorbikes looked. And I was like, we need a little bit more finesse. So broomsticks came flying out of the vault and attached themselves to the side of the motorbike. And in the dream, then we got to utilize what had been pulled out of the vault to do what we needed to do. So that was sort of is connected a bit to this story, because when I made the decision to procure the box and had the imagery about the cardboard box, I let it go. I was like, all right, I'm just going to see how this unfolds. And by Thursday, no box had arrived, but I had to go to the post office to send some medicine to my husband in Oregon. And I had quite a strong, interesting conflict with the man in the post office, with the person that was in the post office, because I wanted to send it in a bag that would fit the medicine. And he was very determined, extremely determined, and I could not understand why, that I had to send it in a box. So I put this box together, really annoyed, with my son going beside me going, oh, what are you doing? Can you just not, even to the post office man? But I was, you know, annoyed that I couldn't be environmentally friendly as I wanted to be in that moment because of his adamacy about the postal box. And so I put the medicine in the box and I sent it. And the next mission that was on my agenda for the day was that I went into the place where I work, and there was a staff member who was there, and they said to me, oh, there's a woman has left a box for you, and she thought you might want it, and here's the box. And she handed me this box. So the box was given after I sent the box that was like the postal box, and the box that came to me has got this picture of a fucking motorbike on the front of it, right? That is how the box came. And it also has not just one motorbike, but 2 motorbikes on the inside. So I don't know how all of that occurred. I have no mathematics. I have no notes. I did no ritual. And specifically, I chose that in my decision because I wanted to see what would happen if I just put my biometric on the tree and said, this is what I need. And that's my process.
Thank you. Next person. Come on, somebody's missing. Who's missing? Nobody else want to come forward?
I think
Okay.
that's it.
All right, so what I wanted you to know was that we'd started last week, the conversation last week was all around Kabbalah, which we're going on to right now. We're going to take a 2-minute break and then we're going to come back to it. The principle of Kabbalah, of course, we looked at was that diagram there, which of course is difficult for you to see, but I'm sure you've all got it written in your grimoires, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay, you've got it written in your grimoire.
Yes.
Anybody else got it
Yeah.
written in their grimoire?
Yeah.
Yep. Anybody else got it written in their grimoire?
Yes.
Yes. Got it all in your grimoire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got that diagram in your grimoire, and that diagram is the making of the box. But did you notice at the bottom that there was 10 lines? And I did ask you to write that they were all Malkut, M-A-L-K-U-T-H, didn't I? Yes. They were all they're all the possible emanations or manifestations from Atziluth. The Atziluth is the moment prior to me saying make a box. It's the same principle as a man is standing on a bridge when he jumps. When is the moment of jumping? Are you sort of following how all this logic happens? So what's really important is, from my point of view as the person who's passing this information on to you, is that none of the making of the boxes was about you. Everything about making the box was tarot. That doesn't need explaining. That just simply requires you to go, oh, okay. And to wait, if necessary, for this to unfold. The people who chose not to be a part of your box making are the glue or the paper cuttings that you have in the bin, the little bits and pieces that you have theoretically or hypothetically rejected. These are important people. So when a box is made, you have, for example, the wood person. Does this wood person want to be in your presence? This wood person, I am including paper in this. Does this paper or wood person or metal person, because nobody's made a box out of tin, but you could have done. You could have made the box out of, didn't really matter. Plastic wouldn't have mattered. What is interesting is what rejects you. Mm-hmm. We don't think that we think, we made a mistake, or we think we just cut the edges of the paper so that it'll be the right size. But in actuality, each aspect of the box making, including the box and including the rejection of whatever is rejected from the actual experience of making the box, is each has their own destiny. And their destiny may not be to be in your presence. So I'm going, for example, to Sharon, and I'm going, you didn't make the box. Well, the box didn't make you. The box didn't choose you. Okay, so you got fucking locked out, didn't you? In a way. Anybody who wants to find an excuse can lay it on themselves and feel lousy. Or you can realize that every aspect of everything that we're doing, everyone has a personality. Every glass person, every table person, every wood person, every glue person, every nail person, every hinge person, every single aspect, including the bits that you decorate the box person with, which includes the feathers and the raffia, etc. Each have their own destiny, and you all choose to come together because some fucktard in the background said, make a box. None of you needed to have taken any notice, of course. And there are those amongst you who have made lots of excuses. And in themselves, what I'm interested in is your excuses, is where you haven't fulfilled the criteria, is where you've chosen to bypass, where you haven't recognized the watcher at the gate, the guardian of the bridge, the way shower at Bunnings, where you haven't recognized the fact that you're living in a dual reality, for lack of a better word, I'm using the term dual, which is the world as we think we know her, and myth world. Now, myth world is difficult to navigate if you do not relate every single step of your day to that which is occurring in myth world. And myth world is not a fake world, and it's not an untrue world. It's the equivalent could be walking through mists where all the mists hide many, many people, and all the mists are people as well. You with me so far? So the recognizing the fact that you are dwelling, walking, smelling, tasting, experiencing the making of the box is actually the smelling, tasting, experience, thinking, conscious awareness of the box making you. So that your capacity to try and impose yourself on the box is the problem of the world. And it will stop you reading tarot successfully. Your imposition on the idea that this is your box, the imposition of the idea that you have done enough, because we can be born and live and die and do nothing, and it doesn't make us any less good compost. But it's really important that we realize that we are in collaboration with the people who are the parts of the box. And that each person, even if it's a reject nail, has a place in destiny that included you for a moment, but then when you're not what I want, you're not who I want to be with. You're not, this is not my experience of destiny. And so they'll look at you, but they'll keep going. You see. What this is meant to do is just move your perspective away from the idea of you as Homo sapiens sapiens, because that's absolute fucking hubris. Does anybody know what Homo sapiens sapiens means? If you don't know what Homo sapiens sapiens means, please look it up, because it's really silly. Homo erectus, well, sort of. Mammalian, yeah, we've got a name for that. So that the box themselves is the dot on the piece of paper. The box themselves is everything that you weren't looking at initially. But the word make a box, when I say make a box, it's like put a dot in the middle of the piece of paper. Yes? And then everything that comes from that is, which is where we drew this line, is the variations of what box person can end up being. And in the case of Nilla person, that box may have been dreamt many years ago. And I'll just share a personal experience with that. When I was about 17 years old, which was 1968, the summer of love. Some of us were there. Yes. I went in Sydney with somebody else to see John English playing Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, the first Jesus Christ Superstar that was on stage in Sydney in that year of 1968. And John English came on stage as Judas in this red jumpsuit with a black arrow up the front, and he had an erection. And I thought, oh, that's pretty. And then I thought to myself, I would love to play that part one day, because this singer is amazing. And I let that go, let it go. The person I was with was snide. That's irrelevant. So I dealt with the snideness of the person beside me, and then through, so because I want you to recognize this weaving, this tapestry, that making the box is part of a tapestry. So the weavings and windings of life that we do tend to think in odd occasions are not our allies, may very well be going, you've got to go this way, or you've got to go that way, or we want you here at a certain time, or oh, we want you there at a certain time. So these weaving windings were such that at one stage in around the year 1999, somebody said, there's a total fuck up happening. All these people standing around a piano, they've got the rights to Jesus Christ Superstar here in Byron. Can you please come in and direct it? Because yes, I've done shows before. And so I came in to direct it, and it was in a way a sort of a disaster. And it was a disaster that ended up being a sellout show, because my work involved with that show, and it was only, I had a little part, and that little part was to add a bit of salt. That's it, get me? And my bit of salt was the fact that I'm an animist and I don't accept their Christian viewpoint of anything. So my bit of salt was to animize this thing, but my bit of salt was to completely fuck up the idea of gender, and to also fuck up the idea that just the men were the warriors and just the women were sort of sitting around with jars of alabaster and putting oil on Jesus's fucking forehead or whatever. And then the following year, because of the fact that the whole show sold out, the request was, can you please do it again? And of course, there was fucking money everywhere, but they couldn't find a man with a 4-octave range, which is what's required to play the part of Judas in this show. So I sat back and went, this is it. It was only then that I remembered at 18 that I said that I was going to play Judas one day. And so I did at 50. Just letting you know, you never know when the tweak of what you have set in motion is going to eventuate. So we do need to be very aware of what we set in motion and what we desire, and what actually know the difference between what we desire and what desires us. Because everybody's meat, yes, everybody's food for everybody else. And it's what kind of food, for example, with that paper, with that antique paper. Now that antique wallpaper, can you come forward, the person with the box with the antique wallpaper? Where's the person with the antique wallpaper?
Yeah.
Okay, that antique wallpaper has been waiting for you. And this experience of being in a collaboration of boxness for what, 50 fucking years? 60 maybe?
Maybe more.
They may have waited 60 years to become a part of a community that's called a box, because no box can be created without a collaboration with other people. And those people can be nails or glue or folding or measurements or your hands, but it's not about us, do you see? And the moment you bring everything back to you and you lose, can you write a word down for me? The word is reciprocity.
Yeah.
Okay, because that word is absolutely tarot. Reciprocity is you, the table you'll be sitting at, if you're sitting at a table, the cloth that may cover the table, the box, if you've got one that may contain the cards, where the cards have come from, the forest that once upon a time dreamt of being tarot cards, and working with a person who could in some way interpret images to tell somebody else that 10,000 years from now would be important to the child of that civilization. Can you get your head around that?
Yeah.
That That's amazing. You can get your head around. It took me a fucking lifetime to get my head around that. Okay, so yeah, you can fucking laugh. Okay, so today you need your pieces of paper. There are 2 people in this room who have done this before, or are continuing to do this. Yes, you may run and hide. Okay, yes, you. Okay, so but again, you're beginning again so that you get to know again. All right. So I did write my notes somewhere of the way I want to run today. Okay, Tara starts nowhere. All right, so some of this is maybe a little lengthy, me talking a lot. It is what it is. Okay, so I want to start first of all with the concept of the word tarot. Nobody knows where the word comes from. If you read 1,000 books, all of which told you where the word tarot came from, they'd have copied their information from somebody else. Just get that one straight first. So that you can, yes, you can read a book on tarot. You can read one of my books on tarot. I don't give a shit if you don't, because it doesn't matter. Because mostly because it keeps moving. Everything keeps moving. Nothing is still. Okay, this is oceanic. What you're dealing with is weather. Tarot is weather. It's probably the closest word that explains what tarot is. Weather patterns. Okay, and all of us are meteorologists. That's first off. So let me take you on a bit of a journey, because I think it's really important to do this before we go into the understanding of the depths of tarot, which is going to be Kabbalah, and then we'll break it open from there. So I'm going to use the concept of a timeline. Okay, I'm not going to ask you forgiveness. I'm just going to do it. Take the idea of the Bronze Age. Can we do that for a moment? The Bronze Age, we're in what's called the current era. The current era was based on it had to do with a financial association with the Romans. Some people think it's got to do with Christianity, and actually doesn't have to do with Christianity. It's based on a massive change of paradigm that occurred as a result of economics 2,000 approximate years ago. So a year zero was created. Now, that's pretty funny to the Chinese, and it's very, very funny to Jewish people, and to some people, for example, who don't even bother with whether it's a year, like people from every indigenous community throughout the world, the idea of a timeline is kind of silly. The idea of one thing expanding from another thing, that's not silly, but the idea of a timeline is, but we'll start somewhere. So 5,000 years ago, approximately, people were traveling from Ireland, which is where the copper came from, across from Ireland, the east coast of Ireland, around the Dublin area. They would cross across to Anglesey. From Anglesey, they would travel down the coastline to what is now Cornwall. That was at once upon a time called the tribal lands of the Dumnonia people. With me? And the Dumnonia mined tin, because bronze is made from tin and copper. You with me so far? Okay. So what happens at the very, very base of what's now known as Cornwall is a place called St. Michael's Mount. Just across the channel, which wasn't always there as a watery person, just across the channel is a place called Mont Saint-Michel. Same name, isn't it? Yes? Okay, cool. Mont Saint-Michel is it's almost like a guardian of a place called Karnak. Not the one in Egypt, by the way. We're talking about what's now known as modern day France, but it's still Karnak. And these are places you can track the standing stones if you wanted to sort of map any of this information. It's well worth mapping, because as you map, what happens is that aspect, I don't know who it was that spoke earlier about the aspect, I guess, of the fact that it's in the background of the consciousness, okay? Even the fact that the kids have come up with the box before you have got the box. So, the standing stones were navigational tools, are navigational tools, okay? But we'll get around, the whole thing is navigational. All of this is navigational, but so you've dug up your copper from Ireland, which wasn't called that. You've come across the very small body of water that's called the Irish Sea, and you've ended up on Anglesey. Anglesey is the modern day name for Mona. Everybody know what Mona is. Also called Inishmon, and it is known as the Isle of Druids. You can just keep that in your back of your memory banks. We'll get back to that's important in a minute. There's the Isle of Druids, and the word Druid is also called, it's also spelled D-R-U-I with a grada on the top. And anybody not knowing what a grada is, it's like a French acute. Okay, so it accentuates the last letter. So that's the Isle of Druids. It's not destroyed yet. We haven't got to that period of history. So from the Isle of Druids is the crossing across to the mainland of what's now called Britain, down to the place of the Dumnona tribe, which is where the tin is gathered. There's a bit of a parlay goes on there. Everybody has a bit of a party, gets together, hangs out for a little bit. Then they move across from St. Michael's Mount to Mont Saint Michel, from there to Carnac. They might hang out in Carnac for a while. Then they're going to cruise on all the way down what is now known as France, and they're going to come to a place that was called Massilia, and nowadays it's called Marseille. Yes, from Marseille they travel across, and in the meantime there's lots of cafes and bazaars and wonderful things to barter and share. And from Massilia they cross to Joppa. With me? And Joppa is the port that's not far away from Jerusalem. So we're in Palestine. Okay. From Joppa, they travel across land into Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem is a gateway to the land of the Nabateans. And the land of the Nabateans, what's left of the land of the Nabateans is nowadays called Petra, on the border of Jordan and what was once called Galilee, okay, near the Dead Sea. So you're on that border. Petra is an ancient city. It's called the Rose Red City, and it's built underground, and there were incredible aquifers, lots and lots of water, a very advanced group of people called the Nabateans, and it was a big hub of commerce. Am I boring you, Lee? You awake? You're just leaning back there, going to fucking daylight savings, can't stand it. So from the land of the Nabateans, that would have been a major trade center. But the land of the Nabateans, which we'll get to why they were wiped out in a minute, went from there onto what's called the Old Silk Road. And from the Old Silk Road, you travel across land. You travel across what's called the roof of the world, which is Tibet. You also access China. You also access the Rus, which is called modern day Russia. You also access all the lands across the Bering Strait, and you can also access all the lands through to what's nowadays known as China. If you wanted to, of course, the Bering Strait's going to take you across to Alaska, which is going to take you down right through to South America and Peru, where you're going to get yourself a balsa wood raft, and you're going to head down through the Pacific Islands to Australia. So we organise with all that. What I'd like you to know is the Bronze Age lasted for an approximate, or so we know, approximate 2,000 years. Now, what happened around the year 65 BCE, and I can say around because these are just fucking calendar dates, around the year 65 BCE to around the year 53 of the Common Era, what occurred was that one little group of people, and I know there's a lot more, I can't just spread out across everything historically, so I'm going to stick with it a little bit. The Romans decided to bolster their financial base. To bolster their financial base, they had to take the Silk Road, you see. So they were quite determined. There was a lot of emperors, and the demise of those emperors is hilarious. If you want to ever look it up and you want to have a good laugh is what happens to every single emperor in Rome, because it's really fucking funny. Even their mothers murdered them. What they decided to do was to bolster their finances, and to bolster their finances, they've invaded 2 places simultaneously. One of them is Britain, the home of some of my ancestors, and the other place is Jerusalem. Okay, now let's just sit on this for a moment, because most people then get these blinkers, which you've got to be very careful with your blinkers, that in some way associates Jerusalem. Jerusalem is Yerushalem, or Yeru Shalom, and Yeru is city, Shalom is peace. Okay, you with me? So that just means city of peace. So it was a pretty peaceful place. But what's interesting is that outside of the walled city of Jerusalem was a place that was called the Forest of Asherah, Asherah. Might want to write that down just so you've got a point of reference. Now, if we can do a little bit of biblical stuff in here, and of course, the twistedly interesting biblical stuff is where you start saying why, and these questions are much more important than your answers, because with the questions we can speculate, with the answers we've trapped the wolf in a box, and we're not going to do that. Okay, but what's interesting is that in the book of Ezekiel, biblical text, is a whole sequence of sights or visions that this bloke has had. And if one didn't understand the concept of Kabbalah, one wouldn't know what he was seeing when he talks of sapphire thrones, for example. That's supposed to be a snare drum moment. What he was visualizing was Kabbalah, was the process of certain things, certain colors, certain things that represent certain sephirah on the tree, blah, blah, blah. But he's tripping. He's on Amanita muscaria. He's fed it to the fucking camels. They've pissed in his bucket. He's drunk that shit. And the use of Amanita muscaria is very well known throughout that region. And the other thing that was very well known was associated with what's called the hashishim. The hashishim, which did use hash, were the warrior caste of that particular region. Okay, so you with me so far? I'm not boring anybody? Okay, cool. So the temples of, they're called the temples of Asherah, which is really odd because of the word, but I'll leave it in there and you can sort of like just cross it off, cross it out, rub it out, do what you got to do with it. This place was an oak grove. Some people speculate that it was a grove of cedars. It's also irrelevant though. Maybe it's not. But what's interesting, if I can just for a moment remind everybody of how short the distances between one place and another in Europe are. If you haven't been to Europe, you've got no idea. I got the shock of my life when I went there and I realized that everything, like I could drive across from London to Cornwall in 5 hours. And of course, for an Australian, that's nothing. For Europeans, I ended up getting lost in Reading, and the cop in the cop shop in Reading said, "You're doing what?" The idea of crossing the country, of course, was not applicable at all. So everything's close together. So to get from Dublin to Massilia probably would have taken about a week. To get from Massilia to Joppa, Jerusalem, would have taken a couple of hours maybe, on a fast horse. What's interesting is the temples of Asherah, or the Asherah Grove. So we're back to Ezekiel. Ezekiel, in his vision, I don't know his prominence. I don't know whether he was Sanhedrin, whether he was a Pharisee, where he fits in, but whatever it was, he had enough oomph to be able to gather an army together, because in his vision, God said to him, which was Yahweh said to him, look, go to the groves of Asherah and just slaughter every man, woman, and child that reveres life in the Asherah grove, please. So Asherah does. He gets an army together. He goes up and he kills every man, woman, and child who are associated with the forests. Now, we may not be talking about humans. Bear that in mind. But we could be, what kind of decimation are we perhaps thinking about if we remove the concept of just people being involved in these stories? That's very important. It's like your box. You're just talking about my box, this, I did that, I did something else. What I'm asking is that perhaps this is nothing to do with us, but perhaps everything's to do with us. So he goes out and slaughters, but the Asherah, the original tree of life, or Otzim, which is what this particular thing we're going to get onto today is all about. The original Otzim was called the Asherah tree. And the Asherah tree is your heritage. It's your parents, their parents, their parents, their parents. In most Indigenous communities, the knowledge of kinship systems is vast. Yes? That includes in certain religious ideologies like Judaism. They have a person who keeps a record of who's fucked who and who's related to who. It all interweaves like a tartan. You with me? Okay. So Ezekiel's gone and killed supposedly every man, woman, and child that's in the forest of Asherah, which is outside of Jerusalem. Now that's a little reminds me of Rio Tinto. If you can bring it into today's ideology, it's just like we're looking at Rio Tinto and what Rio Tinto is doing in Western Australia at the moment to the environment. They're blasting these ancient caverns that have got these artworks in them that are approximately 70,000 years old, for example. They're just like, oops, sorry. Well, this is what happens still. And so I'm saying we're still 2,000 years in the past or 3,000 years in the so-called past. We're still there and the same thing is still happening. You with me so far? Okay. So Ezekiel has his vision. There's the oak forests. The oak forests, the people in the oak forests are also including the plant people and the animal people. I will mention that here. Then you've got Jerusalem itself. At the same time as what's happening in Jerusalem, exactly the same time, the diaspora in Jerusalem mirrors the diaspora in Britain. So that the slaughters and the massacres of Indigenous people occurred at the same time. And you also had to get put in line. Now, earlier, Danger, I think it was Danger, mentioned the cruciform shape. This is rather interesting. Because at the time of the Roman invasions of both Britain and Jerusalem, Rome decided that its major form of torture was to crucify people. So all the roads were lined with people who'd been crucified. They're with ropes, they're upside down, there's some sticks. It's a little bit like Vlad the Impaler doing his thing, but he got the trick from the Romans in the first place. All these crucifixions were taking place apparently all the way through to all along the road to Damascus. There was just all these cruel crosses, and all of these cruel crosses, none of which were necessarily cruciform shape, by the way. It didn't ever, who was slaughtered, it didn't matter. The only reason for crucifixion was sedition. Sedition. And I'm just going to break away a little bit for a second from this whole lead up to tarot, break away a little bit because of the oddness that all of you should be considering. I mean, how many people here had, probably half of you, that's a bit of an assumption, but I would assume half of you have had anything to do with Christianity or some variation of it. So just to say half of you have, and this makes a bit of sense. Okay. Sedition. Yes, somebody wrote sedition. Or someone spell it right. Thank you. So anybody in this fucking piece of folklore that's been passed down through as factual, that's called Christianity, in this piece of folklore, what happened is the man that they'd picked up named Yeshua, which is Yod He Shin Vav He, by the way. We'll get around to that in a minute. The moment you add shin to a thing, you've added some tooth and claws and a bit of sort of like firepower, or a smoking gun to a word. We'll get back to that. This person was supposed to have been strung up or hung up or nailed up or whatever you want on a place called Golgotha, the Mount of Skulls, which was solid rock, by the way. You couldn't get a fucking cross in there if you tried. And it was done on private property, supposedly. And according to the folklore, there was a cross on one side and a cross on the other side, and a thief was on each one. And one of the thieves asked Jesus to forgive him, and the other one didn't. With me on that? Except for the fact nobody ever crucified anybody for theft. They used to cut their hand off. That was left to the Sanhedrin. That wasn't taken up as any, the Romans didn't give a fuck about any crime whatsoever except sedition, because sedition said, do not challenge our might. That's all sedition is. John Howard, by the way, in Australia brought back the law of sedition in the 1990s. I don't know whether you knew that, as an illegality. So it became illegal to speak out against the government, and it's an imprisonable offence for the last 20 years. Okay, and if you didn't know that, it's well worth knowing. So anyway, we go back to this particular period of history when Rome's doing its thing, and it's destroying all the people in Britain, and it's destroying all the people in Jerusalem. Now, it comes through this historically as if in some way they're separate, and they're not separate. But this is a trade deal, to get me. So the tin, which comes from Cornwall, and the copper that comes from Ireland, making the bronze, is worth a lot of money. So it's equivalent, because at that stage historically, gold wasn't that big a deal. Okay, but bronze was. Most were Bronze Age to Iron Age tools. Yes, that's absolutely fantastic. But the trade routes between China and Ireland were well established when Rome decided that it was going to invade Jerusalem, when Rome decided that it was going to invade Britain. Now, note, it doesn't mention any of the other invaded places, but that's because they didn't have an historian with them who could write journals. So we don't know what happened to the other places. But when Jerusalem was invaded, we had a thing called the diaspora, and the diaspora ended up creating what's called terra nullius in Jerusalem. Everybody had to fuck off unless they followed the rules of the Romans. The same thing in Britain. If you fucked off or you died, unless you succumbed and became a client kingdom. And the people that were working with you were then brought into slavery and a feudal system. So we've got Jerusalem, we've got Britain. We can just leave Britain out of the thing for the moment. Now, when we get across to Jordan and the lands of Nabatea, that journey opens up that takes us across to Tibet, takes us across to China, takes us across to all the other countries. And trade has been going on a long, long time, but we are almost indoctrinated from a young age not to know this. We're indoctrinated from a young age to see events historically that come through school as separate, and they're not. These trade routes and the idea of what's called international free trade that's occurring at the moment is identical to what happened around the time 63 of the Common Era, or the Roman invasions of Jerusalem. Now, at the time of the invasions, there were several sects, and there was apparently a messiah on every corner. Oh, let me fill you in on that one. You probably, some people here have heard this. The word messiah, you know where it comes from? Anybody know where it comes from? I do. Is it important? Yes. The word Messiah, yes, Ari.
Comes from the word messiah, which it means anointed.
No.
By
no, incorrect. The word Messiah comes from the Egyptian word Mesa, which is the fat of the crocodile or the monitor lizard that was used to anoint a pharaoh to godhood.
Yeah, I knew it had to do with the crocodile fat for the anointing.
Yeah, but it's got to do with, that's it. So what you're talking about, the anointing, has nothing to do with it. The anointing in this particular instance, the Messiah is the product. The Christosing, which of course is the Greek word for anointing, that's where the word Christ comes from. Christosing, which is the anointing, that's different. It's not the same. That's a doing thing, not a noun.
Can you spell the word that
Mesa, The Mesa is
Mesa.
M-E-S-S-A-H is the anglicization of that. Really doesn't matter. But it's the fat that was used. It's actually a monitor lizard, very large monitor lizard. And that was mixed in with things like spikenard that was worth a fucking fortune. Spikenard is lavender, French lavender. And the oil of spikenard was worth more than gold. And anybody wants to get a little off tangent here and look into the Messianic legacies will notice that this is part of it, because the woman with the alabaster jar, who was supposedly Miriam Magdalena, anointed this man in preparation for his initiation. But that was a very common form of initiation, still used today. It's not old at all. Okay, but that's beside the point. That's a little to the side. But what's interesting is that the diaspora of Jerusalem sent the main protagonists in our story in two directions. One group ends up in the Greco-Roman environment of the Mediterranean in Europe, which is where the dominant Roman hegemony is, and the other group disappeared in Iberia, modern-day Spain. You with me? Okay. Mesa means inside in Greek, interestingly. It's not the same word, Artemis. Please don't do that. I'll just very momentarily, yeah, I just very momentarily go on. Be careful of word association like that, because it'll get you into trouble. Somebody said to me at one stage in time, Tara, which is the main seat of the Irish kings being anointed, is spelled Tara, and therefore the Egyptian influence. She tried to tell me, she's an Egyptian scholar, that part of the word was Ra, associated with the sun god. And I said it's spelled T-E-M-H-A-I-R, stupid. So misinterpretations can occur. Mesa is different. It's the same as Mesa or Mesa in America, which of course is a ridgeline. Yeah, so won't go there. All right, back to the story. So people go in two directions. One of the group was called Paulists, and they ended up in the Greco-Roman era or environment, where the so-called deity, and we can get around to that later because that word's got to go, as far as the idea of a Homo erectus has got to go, of any gender. There's no such thing. It's nothing to do with that. The so-called deity was Mithra. And Mithra, like Dionysus and like Osiris, was born in a stable to a virgin, or born in a cave to a virgin. Okay, so this is a very old theme. And the old theme in this particular instance is the cave or the stable is this absolute womb. And the idea of a virgin was owned by no man. That's what the word means in Greek. So that in Jerusalem, for example, under the auspices of not only the Sadducees and the Sadducee and the even the Elohists and all the rest of it, the idea a woman had two marriages. The first one, she remained virgin, owned by no man, and that marriage would take place if she, in preface for maybe if she was fertile and she could get pregnant. And the marriage proper didn't take place until she was able to bear a child. Because the whole point of marriage was to do with procreation, had nothing to do with love. Hi, Victoria, you're looking very, very worried again, as you always do. I love that look. Okay, so when the dudes get to, and this is the Paulists, when the Paulists get to the Greco-Roman environment around the Mediterranean, in those regions, the only so-called, and I'm stumbling because I don't want to use words that could be misinterpreted. That's the only reason. You with me? Yeah, the people in power, and that's a very dodgy way to put it, however I'm putting it there. The people in power were, for lack of a better word, worshippers or adherents of Mithra. Now, Mithra is called the god of war, just like Mars. That's bullshit. And in your time, if you can look for what it really is, that's important. But if you accept that Mithril was considered by the soldiers to be the god of war, then you're fucked. And I'd ask you not to be. So do your research, that's important. Okay, so when they got to Greco-Roman environments, which was the creme de la creme, that's where all the money was. It's like a little like, trying to think, Dubai, for example, comes to mind. Okay. When they got there and they found that all the money, they had to somehow turn around their little religion from the Mount of Sinai, which is a thunder god called Yahweh. They had to get it somehow accepted. So they created this legend, this story, came to be known as Christianity. And Christianity was implemented by way of a hostile sword. Let's be very clear about that. So the other group that disappeared went to Iberia, which is modern day Spain, and disappeared. Okay, I want to get rid of that chat box off to the side. There's no use to the moment. No, cancel. Okay, that's not working. Okay, disappeared. Now, nobody knows or knew that they were there. These are the other people who've run away from the conquerors. Yes, they disappeared. And they didn't raise them. Nobody knew that they were there historically until the 1300s. Now, the 1300s, 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries are very, very interesting, because by the time the 11th, 12th, and 1300s are established, Christianity is well and truly the religion du jour, okay? And it has blasted its way through massacre after massacre after massacre, because it got the ticks that it needed to be authorized. In the 1300s, and of course the Inquisition goes down there, and what happens with the Inquisition? Of course, that's a power grab by the Northmen, which are the Normans. Of course, were not French. They came from the Nordic areas down through France, across to Britain, and took over all the homes and territories of the indigenous Britain, while the indigenous Britain were often saving their souls by going on a crusade to Jerusalem, and most of them died. When they came home, they didn't have their properties anymore. That's just a little beside. So the group that disappeared didn't raise themselves up again until the 1300s. And the person that raised their head up was a man named Moses de Leon. Please write that down. Moses de Leon. And Moses de Leon raised his head up from where he'd been hiding, or where the people had been hiding, with a book called the Zohar, which is translated through to Book of Splendors. Anybody who's interested can get also hold of anything by a person called Carlos Suarez. And the first section of that person's book, called Moses de Leon, no, the spelling's wrong. We'll get around to that. Sorry. The Zohar, which was the Book of Splendors, which was Kabbalah. Now, I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to you without you having to necessarily write down anything except certain points, because we have become very, very, very lazy as a people by using pen and paper. There's a very important reason that we haven't. Yes, thank you, Luna. I think it is, Leon. Insofar as most cultures that are indigenous, which have been wiped out by Christianity, have been cultures of orality. But this is why I'm talking to you instead of reading what I'm telling you from a book. Okay, I haven't put this in a book. I have taught this for decades, this information. Moses de Leon pops his head above the surface. He's got the Zohar in his hand, and the Zohar, the Book of Splendors, the Book of Splendors is this, which we're going to cover in a few minutes when I finish telling my story. Now, Moses de Leon began the process of introducing Kabbalah to the people of the so-called West. I want to hopefully tantalize you a little bit with this. The so-called West, which includes the Rosicrucians, the Masonic orders, all of the magical orders throughout the rest of Europe. That includes the understanding of architecture, the understanding of spatial reality and mathematics. All of this was introduced from Moses de Leon and his cohorts into the magical orders of Europe. And it's wound its way all the way through, of course, is the concept, which I'm not even going to get into today, but I could if I wanted to, of bloodlines. But the bloodline is the Asherah tree. So all these people get caught up in Bejan, Lincoln, and Lee, Messianic legacies, and they get caught up in the whole Magdalenian conspiracy theories, etc. When they're not realizing what this theory and what this understanding is all about is the tree of life, is the Asherah tree that Ezekiel decided to destroy, that was associated specifically to the Druids. And I haven't got time today to go into the research that I've done that proves that the Druids and the people of the Asherah tree were having communication, except that several of the letters are very similar and the language is very similar. And that's what makes it odd. And that's what first started triggering my, I don't know, go back in 1982, the oddness of it started me researching and finding out what was the connection and understanding that the mysticism of the Asherah tree was a matrilineal lineage, because you always knew who your mother was, you never necessarily knew who your father was. In difference to a patrilineal lineage, which was that which was demanded by a Greco-Roman hegemony and also by the Sanhedrin. So the Sanhedrin hated women. And they didn't like women, for example, who wouldn't do what they were supposed to do. And that was lie down like Eve. Fuck Lilith. Lilith was going, get the fuck off me, you great big fat shit bag, and go fucking do something else. I'm busy here. I'm fishing in the Red Sea. Mind your own fucking business. But the word Eve, which is interesting because we have been recently just talking amongst us as a group about the so-called sin of Eve, which is still apparent today with the removal of children from their mothers if their mothers are single in many countries that I've just fought to get my freedom from. This goes back to apparently the sin of Eve, but did you know that the word Eve is the word Havah, H-A-V-A-H? Bearing in mind there are no vowels. H-A-V-A-H, write that down, please. Havah. And Havah translates through to one word and one word only, and that's life. With me so far? You following some of this patterning that I'm looking at? Okay, the patterning doesn't stop there. The fascinating thing that I came across recently, you do realize, of course, that the biblical New Testament was translated by a prick calling himself King James of Scotland, who translated the Greco-Roman texts of the Pentateuch or the Torah into English, and he called what was excuse me, he called what was in the books paradise, he called paradise Eden. You know that? You following me so far? Eden. Do you know what Eden is? It's a fucking river between the Irish Sea and the North Sea that goes past Edinburgh, which is Edinburgh, by the way, is the same word as Dunedin. You getting me? You following this? How is Edinburgh and Dunedin the same word? What's a borough and what's a dun? A dun is a fortress. It's a Celtic word for a fortress. A borough is an Anglo, so it's basically a Saxon word for a town. You with me? But both of them have the word Eden with them. So consequently, that fucked up bastard, King James, must have thought it was a pretty fucking wonderful river to name paradise after it. When he mistranslated the Pentateuch into the English Bible, he mistranslated all of it. I wanted to get this set up for you so that you understand that the system that I'm going to be teaching you or getting you to understand is not Jewish. The Jewish language came from Syriac, 22 letters, from Aleph through to Zayin. There's 22 letters. And this is where I've run into trouble with people that are purists and want to kill me because I'm teaching organic Kabbalah. Okay? It does not belong to anybody. There's no misappropriation here. This is just what Moses de Leon introduced to the West, and it is meant to be organic, and it has been set up to seem like a religious doctrinal system. So in most, when you go online, if you're looking up Kabbalah, you're going to be finding everything to be like, oh, it's so fucking holy, it's so fucking this, it's so fucking that, it's so fucking spiritual, it's so fucking sacred. Get over it, it's not. It's the veins in your arms. It's your bloodline, you understand? Every forest of beans starts with one fucking bean seed. You with me? And so you sitting in front of me, Victoria, because you've got you square in the middle of the fucking page here in my screen, you began trillions and trillions and billions and trillions and trillions and trillions and billions and trillions and trillions of years ago. And you may have been recognized as a mammal 5 million years ago. It's still the same seed. Patterns in the seed. Yes, seed keeps moving, forest to forest to forest to forest. Okay, what's that from Leah? Okay, right. Thanks, Leah. Excellent. So the Asherah tree, which was first mentioned, interestingly enough, in Sumer, I can backtrack you a little bit. Let's go a little bit. You've got Sumer, you've got Babylon. From Babylon, you go into Jerusalem. From Jerusalem, you go into Europe. From Europe, you go into Australia and so on. But basically, there's Egypt in there as well. Very few people here are from the Middle East. That wouldn't be a problem. One of my dear friends is from Kabul. And he's got 2 degrees in quantum physics, and we have these long conversations about Kabbalah because he knows also that this is an organic system. But it's been claimed and turned into a religion. Religion is when you stop asking questions, when you give the actual facts and say, you can't think beyond this. You must accept this doctrine as the truth and not question it. You with me? So that all of this is questionable. You do your research. Teach me something I don't already know. I'm fine with that. I'm happy with that. That's interesting. But what's interesting is that when the Romans also went to Britain, what Suetonius Paulinus and his troops did was figure out that the rebels were living in the Welsh hills. And he couldn't work out at all, because I mean, Claudius was a fuckwit. Everybody knows Claudius was a fuckwit. He couldn't work out how the rebels in the hills were getting fed. And then he worked out one day when it's those bastard druids on Mona. So we've got to go and kill them all. So Suetonius Paulinus and his troops, the 47th Legion, headed to Mona and burnt down the entire forest and anybody and everybody in it. And they murdered as many people as they could. Julius Caesar's crew tried to go there beforehand, but the Menai stopped them. They couldn't cross the water because they were terrified of what they called the shadow women, who were all along the edges of the water, summoning the storms to come down and to drown the fucking troops, which they did. Okay. So Kabbalah was originally called the Asherah tree. Asherah is the same word with a twist as Hava. Because Asherah also means life. So somewhere the idea of permaculture is really old, but includes us as a species. We're involved in the pattern of permaculture when we think of the Assiah tree. The Assiah tree is not, for example, is knowing that you don't go and pick that particular group of mushrooms and leave none, because if you leave none, the spores will not generate again in this when the season is correct. Okay, it's knowing what to plant when, and that includes ideas, that includes knowledge. So within this system that we're going to start to unfold today, it's 3:26. I'm running a bit behind. That's okay. It's fucking daylight saving. I wanted to give you this information beforehand so that you realize that this is organic. This is not based on any dogma. And it is not in the book Advanced Tarot. So it's just between us. Now, let's get back to the sort of the diagram. I did get you to, first of all, this is the thread, if you like, of the songline from Moses de Leon. And before Moses de Leon, back to Jerusalem. Before Jerusalem, back to the temples of Asherah, which were the forests that were burned down by Ezekiel, because let's not worry about whether people are LGBTQI or women, for goodness sakes, but they've all just got to die. They're not worth anything. They're not even worth the same amount as a goat. Okay, so we can afford to get rid of them. But are they actually talking about the forest, the Asherah, or are they talking about the survival mechanism of people who had the same thing before the Industrial Revolution, which was called common land? You with me so far? Do you know what common land is? Common land is the land that's available in an environment of forest where everybody can get their food. And isn't it interesting how the word common has been manipulated into a word that means less than important? Just be aware that that's what happens with the language of the conquerors. They will get you to think within the stratosphere of the way they want you to think. And this is what school does to people. It gets you to think in a certain way only. It doesn't allow you to spread out in the forest and get to know the whole of the creatures. You've got to stick to the path in a schooling system. Okay. And in the schooling system, of course, the whole idea of permaculture doesn't get taught. You're not taught to be makers and creators of boxes, the processes, the mathematics thereof. You're not taught that from the beginning. You're just taught to learn the math, not what it's for. You know, you have to sort of like spend 16 years learning the math before you perhaps potentially go to university and find out that it's got to do with atomic fusion and a bomb that gets dropped on somewhere like Hiroshima. So we can be manipulated and railroaded by these systems that have been in place for a minimum of 2,000 years. Yes, until you get out of your own fucking way and stop thinking you made the box. But the box in itself is a collaboration between you and life. A collaboration. I suggested a collaboration. Make a box. Okay. I didn't hold you up against a wall with a gun under your throat. Say or else. No threat inherent in it. I didn't give a shit if you made a box or not. I was interested in what you could feed me, what you could feed back, what you could feed to the group, what you could share around the group to get the whole group of all of us here interacting and interweaving in the patterns of recognition, yes, of possibilities, which is what tarot is. So you've got 78 cards in a pack of tarot. Involved in them, you've got a pack of tarot pack of cards is usually split up into two sections. Those two sections are called minor and major. Fuck that off to start with. Okay, we're not going to use the concept of better than and lesser than. But there are a specific group of pictograms that are known as the major arcanum. Just know that. There's 22 of them. Yeah. There are 22 letters associated with each one of those pictograms. There's a letter connected to each of the 22. With me? From Aleph through to Zayin, including Het and Sade. Don't think about it. Don't think about it yet. We'll get to that. But you've got 22 letters there. Those 22 letters, which are called the 22 Hebrew letters, came from Syriac. And they probably came from elsewhere before that, because we could be looking into the future, not the past. You know that, don't you? We've already established that. So we could be coming to understand what the hologramic knowledge or wisdom that the ancient people of the ancient future have left for us to discover, so that we can become who we're going to become 10,000 years from now. Following me so far? Is this meant to fuck your brain around? Yes. But so that you've got it in there to let it move, to give it some air, you understand, to give it a bit of space to break away from the way you thought you were going to learn. You're not going to learn that way here, because everybody's different, and knowing that gives you a freedom of breaking away from fixed ideology ever. You will never implement an ideology onto another person, and vice versa. If they try, you can calmly go, don't have to agree with it. And you also don't have to argue, because one of the things I learned a long time ago is if you're right, don't argue. Okay, you've got 22 letters. With this pattern, have you all drawn this pattern at some stage? You're going to need to. You're going to need to turn a page, please, and draw this pattern exactly sort of as it is now. I want to get to a certain point to sort of close up today. I'm sort of glad that we're on. Can I borrow your pen? Okay. I'm just going to start because I don't want to be able to utilize my friend's pen all the way through. I'm going to I'll just do this. I'll just start. No, it's all cool. Here you go. Don't come back. I want to start out by, first of all, just drawing 3 lines. See how I've linked those 3 spheres? So what I'd like you to do then is to link this sphere and that sphere.
Straight?
Yep.
Oh,
yep. And then from this sphere to that sphere. So I'll just,
and all those little mini dots in the middle, like?
Yeah, those little mini dots will matter. They will and they won't. There are a couple of people who've done this before with me, and they know how fucking funny I'm being. Sorry, it's not. So see what I've done there so far. I've done that little triangle shape, and then I've done a line that goes all the way through to this sphere here, which is the outside. So, because actually we're looking at this. So one could say, this is my gut, and I could say, this is my skin. Okay. Then what I've done here, if I was to the, I mean, I'll continue. So down to the side, I put a line, I line those ones up on the side. Still needing a pen?
I can look at it now.
Okay. And then when you've lined those ones up on the side, just bring the lines down to that little one there. And then those ones that are at the bottom there, just bring them down to the very bottom one. Okay, we're with me so far? Then you're going to draw a line from this little round circle to the one in the middle there. And from that little round circle to the one in the middle there. Then you're going to draw a line from that little round circle there to the one in the middle. And from that little round circle to the one in the middle. Then you're going to draw a line from that circle way up the top there to the one in the middle. And from that other one from way up the top there to the one in the middle. With me so far? Anybody having problems? No? Okay. Then you're going to draw a line across there. And then you're going to draw a line across there. Okay? But that's basically your pattern. Now, what I'd like you to do with those lines, if you wouldn't mind, is to count them. And start, when you've counted them, start telling me how many there are. Thanks, Danger, yes. Thanks, Nishka, yes. Thanks, Ari, yes. Thanks, Keka, yes. Lily, yes. Rebecca, you've got 2. You might have missed something. Sharon, yes. Gabrielle, yes. Victoria, yes. Will, yes. Kristen, yes. Katarina, yes. Rebecca, yes. Okay, cool. So looking pretty much like you've all got the number 22. Okay, cool. Then may I have that sheet back? So if you've got 22 of them, and then you've got, if you add the 22 of them, how many of these circles have you got? Not included the dotty one at this stage. Ten, yep, 10, thank you, 10. 10, yep, good, 10, thank you. Okay, so if you add the 10 to the 22, you've got 32, yes? But if we add a little, the dotty one that's there and not there, it makes a 33rd one, yes? A potential 33rd one. Because it's dotty, it's not filled in, it's dotted. So it's 20 potential 33rd one. So what you've got, you're with me so far. You're all looking down, you're busy there with your pens and paper. What you've got is 22 letters attached to 10 Sephirot, which is 32, with a potential 11th Sephirot, which is that one that's dotted, which makes 33. So numerologically, we're going to be hitting 22, 11, 22, and 33. We get onto numerology next week. We're all, every bit of this is all woven together in a tapestry. That's the tree of life. Okay, so each one of those 22 lines that link up each of those circles is what is temporarily called the major arcanum. They're the pictographs. There's 22 of them. Now there is one little extra bit to add to this before we get even further. We're going actually, because Ari, you've got the hold on the host, I actually can't type anything on the side, which you probably can do. So can you be ready with your typing skills? So this particular sphere here, which is my skin, is called Malkut, M-A-L-K-U-T-H. TH is pronounced T. Malkut, not Malkut or Malkut. It's Malkut. If I go under the dermis a little bit, deeper into my body, this next circle is called Yesod, Y-E-S-O-D. Ari is putting them in the side for you to look at. If I move in the direction of a snake, I'm going to serpent my way through this. I move up here through there into that next one across there on what seems to be the left. That's called Hood, H-O-D. I cruise across that line there. The next circle is called Netzach, N-E-T-Z-A-C-H. If I cruise up then through the middle one that I'm looking at in this particular instance, which could be my probably the best place is my duodenal cap. The duodenal cap is at the very top of your stomach, yes. But about that, it's called Tiferet, T-I-P-H-A-R-E-T-H. PH is, as in fuck you. Firmament. Again, interestingly enough, even though it's spelled T-I-P-H-E-R-E-T-H, can you please make a note to yourself that the original T is not Tet, T-E-T-H. It is actually Tov, T-A-U. If Keke has got a PNG diagram, please remove it. Keke, please remove that diagram, the PNG file. You there, darling?
I don't know how to remove it.
Okay, I'll write.
It just had the words you said. That's.
I just want you to not do that. This is an oral class. You are to learn this. If you go looking it up, you will get distracted. Please don't do that. Please do. Thank you. If it can be removed, please remove it. If there's any way of removing that, I don't know how. Okay. If anybody wants to look at it, they're free to do so. It's not my part. But anyway, where am I? So Tiferet, T-I-P-H-A-R-E-T-H, bearing in mind that there are no vowels. But the original letter that looks like a T is not Tet, T-E-T-H. It is Tov, T-A-U. And T-A-U pronounced Tov is Th. Yes? But it can also be pronounced T if it's at the beginning of a word. That gets a bit complicated at this stage. We can uncomplicate that with familiarity. Okay, moving across in the serpent shape, we come to this particular circle here. This circle is pronounced Gevurah, but is spelled G-E-B-U-R-A-H. But a B in the middle of the word is pronounced V. So it's Gevurah, Gevurah. From Gevurah, we travel across this line here to this particular circle, and that circle is called Chesed, C-H-E-S-E-D. What you probably noticed so far, which I want to get a little bit, we've gone from here, we followed this path to here, we followed that path to here, we followed that path to here, we followed that path to Tiferet, we followed that path to Gevurah, we followed that path to Chesed. Now, the only place on this diagram where there is no path we're on now, we're going across here without there being a path to this particular circle up the top here called Binah, B-I-N-A-H. So that's the only part of this diagram that does not have one of those 22 paths. You with me? And this is going to be very important when we get around to prophecy, because this is where we are now, as far as recognizable history goes. And there we go across that path to that particular circle there, which is called Chesed, sorry, Chokmah, C-H-O-K-M-A-H. Chokmah is also called the sphere of the zodiac. And it is also called the place of Hava, H-A-V-A-H, which all, as we were discussed earlier, is called Eve. Some of this is going to start making sense. It's going to start clicking into place. A couple of weeks, it starts clicking in place. We move across from, follow a path, and there, the very, very heart or the inside of the seed, or the essence of the seed, and that essence of the seed is Keter. K-E-T-H-E-R. This little spotty bit in the middle is known as Da'at, D-A-apostrophe-A-T-H. Da'at. D, it's up on the board there, D-A-apostrophe-A-T-H. And what the apostrophe is to make certain that you don't mistake the double A. The double A in this language is Oyin, which is a very different letter. The double A is two separate olives. So this actually means, that last word, art, means first door, first earth. I hope I just blew your minds. So it's a possibility because it's not a known thing. It never sits there solid. It's a possibility. Okay. Can you repeat that? Yes, Luna, it is. It's Dolet is door. Aleph is one or first. Aleph is one or first. Tov is TH, which is earth, which is associated geometrically with the number 40. Is this all making sense? No, I'm chucking all the jigsaw pieces in the middle, and you've got the lid of the box. You'll have the lid of the box, and then you can start to put it all together. But if I don't give you all the information at this stage in time, you'll get terribly lost because it'll be set out like a school, and that's not how this works. Okay. So the art is there and not there, which means that it's all possible potentials. Okay, now let's just relax for a moment. And I just want to take you a little bit further before we actually finish for the day. I want you to look at Malkut again and understand that Malkut is every possible element. That which we know and that which we don't know. And in this particular moment, just for the sake of it, we're going to pull on the Greek elements of earth, air, fire, and water. Where in actual fact, when you get into elements, there's hundreds of them. But of course, Diogenes didn't necessarily know that at the time. Aristotle did, but then again, Diogenes didn't. So they're the four elements. Okay. Yesod, the next one up, is considered associated with, these are all planetary aspects we're getting to. Yesod, moon. Netzach, Mercury, sorry, Hood, Mercury. Netzach, Venus. Tiferet, the sun. Gebra, Mars. Chesed, Jupiter. Bina, Saturn. Chochmah, Uranus. Keter, Neptune. And art is associated potentially with Pluto, both a planet and not one, there and not there, the furthest outer reaches of our solar system.
So that bottom one is
It's not bottom. You can't use that terminology with me. It's outer. I want you to keep thinking of this way. I want you to keep thinking of this as from the deepest inwards to the furthest outwards. This is a seed. This here is when it fruits, when we reach the height of summer. This could be considered as the depth of winter. This could be considered the heights of summer. Most people think of this diagram as up and down or in and out. I want you to destroy those concepts today, please, because they will be a trap to you. And when you look at them online, you're always going to see them as above, so below, but that's bullshit. Total fucking bullshit. Who teaches me this? I've been taught by things that are not human.
That's good. I was just checking on the name. That one.
Just show me. This particular person here, is that who you want to know about? What do you want to know about them? What do you want to know about them?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I just want to check their name.
Malkuth. M-A-L-K-U-T-H.
Thank you.
The elements that make Earth. I'm going to take you on a speculative journey before we do finish with today. A speculative journey associated with the idea of evolution as we know it. Just the idea. Because nobody knows anything. That's it. The idea of evolution is we have a big bang, everything goes in, light goes instantaneously everywhere, matter goes instantaneously everywhere within a split second afterwards. Sooner or later, things start to potentially form orbits around certain matters of fusion or fission, depending on which way you want to look at it. But let's call our star as sun, shall we? Which is Tiferet, the center of our so-called galaxy. Now, not only is Tiferet the center of our so-called galaxy, Tiferet is each of you. Tiferet is each of you, and around you go these experiences. Okay. Tiferet is the center of the matter that's being under discussion, and around it are all the potentials that can relate to that matter under discussion. None of them are fixed. They're just circulating around in their own orbits. Each of them has their own personality, just like everybody in this room. But tarot, in this particular instance, we could say is Tiferet, because Tiferet is using me to be a mouthpiece at the moment for tarot. Okay. So let's say that Earth forms around our solar star, and that this is here. This is this little puppy here. All the elements that make up life right here. The moon then starts to affect tides. The moon either comes into the orbit. Yes, you can look at the books of Ereshkigal. You can look at the the different books that have come out of the Middle East. They're very, very exciting, some of them. Particularly the Sumerian material. This is not. Can anybody see that? Can you see it?
It's not readable.
Of course it's not. It's in Sumerian. It's cuneiform.
Yeah, I can see something.
It's cuneiform. What this grimoire is the translations from a cuneiform dialect. Yes, I can see you, Nilla. I know you're hanging out for me to die, so you claim my fucking books, bitch. Okay, but this is cuneiform, okay, which is where the word Inanna comes from. Ishtar is Babylonian. That's much later. So that's cuneiform. And there, if it became your destiny to do so, you would end up with things like this. So that's not necessary for today, but it's just the explorations of some of the things that this leads to, which are not necessarily associated with tarot. But I just wanted you to know that this is very multifaceted, and that if you get caught in the idea that this is just a tarot, you're going to be fucking losing the plot. This is much bigger than that. Okay, so Yesod, we are associated with the moon. Moon rules, it's got to do with the tides, the tidal pool, whatever. Therefore, we do associate this with water. And we can think with this concept of the moon here, Yesod, of single cell creatures, sort of amphibian-like, heading towards, I'm cartooning it, I know, heading towards the land. When the waters finally recede a little bit, volcanoes have stopped, it's rained, fucking water everywhere, not a drop to drink, and some of us slither onto land. And ultimately, I have a flesh and blood body. There's a lot of me is water. This is not new water. I'm not made of new water. I'm made of ancient water. I'm made of water from before the Big Bang, but I am made of water from when Earth formed her one-cell creatures and we started to differentiate and come onto land. So we're talking a few million years here, and we're getting to the quickening now historically, but that's okay. This is the only way that we can perceive evolution at the moment historically. It'll be very different in 20,000 years and 100,000 years and 2.5 billion years, but we're not worried about that today because we can't do that. Progressing over here to Hood is where communication starts. So you might have a monkey going, hoo, 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 hoo. And you could have birds calling, kawak, kawak, tuku, tuku, tuku. Okay, we've got communication sitting there in the sphere of Hood. So of course it's ruled by Mercury. It can also be long and short journeys. It has been supposed by other people involved in this particular analysis as to represent the moment when we as a species harnessed or became befriended with fire. So you could think of the hearth fire or the campfire, or when the First Nation of this country, for example, clear a certain area with fire for regenerative processes. Where we got the knowledge from, that's another story. We'll get around to that. That's the art. That's fucking the art. That's right there where it comes from. Okay, because we get seeded all the time, but I won't go there. All right, let's move across there to Netzach. Netzach is associated with Venus. This is where a good fuck comes from. Let's procreate, shall we? Let's know that a labia is much more than what we maybe thought it was. This is the concept of conception, the idea of matrilineal associations in here. It's everything fecund and juicy and luscious and intimate and yummy. Yes, a good fuck. From there, let's move across to this central theme. And if we're still on the idea of evolution, we're sort of now getting into the idea where things start to speed up, because things will speed up before they end up in a state of or flatline. They'll speed up first. So this central theme is called, interestingly enough, by other people, and I'll use it here today, and you can play around with that, the sphere of the sacrificed gods. Okay, do we need to spend time on this? Yes, just 2 minutes. We mentioned earlier in week one, the word God. I used it once or twice with you, and I didn't really give you much more information. There is a piece I'll put up on our Facebook page so that you can read it through and understand it. It's got nothing to do with the idea of a deity. The idea of a deity, which is like the word God, the Greek word for God is demon or daemon, D-A-E-M-O-N, which is demon. Okay. Now, one of the interesting gods, if you like, in the Middle East is the jinn, D-J-I-N-N. Of course, the word genie comes from that. And the jinn is the wind, is a certain wind. Okay. And when that certain wind comes, it can be like this wall of fucking sand coming, a wall. We've had them in Australia. We've had them lots of places. It's that huge dust wind that goes across to New Zealand, for example, to the mountains there and leaves a red stain all across the snow. That's called the jinn, D-J-I-N-N. How it's been translated, I could actually shit all over Jung and say Jung's responsible for this, for the humanization, but it's not a people. The human creation of images of deities into human looking. This is why Islam refuses or does not want to have images or even photographs, because they don't want a thought, a movement, a wild thing, a natural phenomenon to be trapped in the image of a man or a woman. Do you understand? And that's what happens. That's what's happened. And that's what's happened with a lot of the Abrahamic religions, is they have trapped the idea of wildness and certain points of weather and certain landmarks and certain way showers. They've trapped them into looking like, then calling them a god and a goddess and making them look like they were something we should bow down to. That's not what this is about. This is never what this is about. So Tufaret is the season of the sacrifice gods is, for example, in the Middle East, which through necessity or whatever else, people started eating grass approximately 10,500 years ago. Nowadays they call it grain and they think it's good for you, but we're the only mammal who eats grass. Fucking it's not good for us. But at the end of every cycle or season of growth, people then started harvesting the corn, harvesting the maize, harvesting, and when that harvest was called the sacrifice of a deity, because if it's come to fruition, it's come to its fulfillment, and then you cut it down. Whoever thought of that is, I mean, it makes me cross, but still, that's just personal. One dude here in the era when starvation must have ravaged the Middle East and the grain's been cut down, one dude has gone, I'm going to I've got a bit of surplus, I'm going to lock it up. So that person locks up the surplus, and the following year when the starvation is still going on, the people in the village come and say, hey, can you just feed us now? And the person goes, pay me the first banks. The first banks. And the first concept of hierarchy starts right here. The idea of better than or lesser than. If I've got more money than you, I'm better than you. You're just common. Just like we used to call land or Mother Earth. Okay, so this bastard's locked up the grain. Everybody else is going hungry, but this person likes the feeling that happens when you achieve something. But in this particular instance, the achievement is a sense of power over. You with me? That sense of power over requires an army. Devara. Planetary association is Mars. But the concept of army is really, really modern, because prior to that, the truer relationship of Mars to this particular instance is the baboon. Because baboons are remarkable people. Baboons move in a pack, place to place, and they need to protect themselves from lions. So what they do is they get all of the women who are gestational, and they get all of the young, and they get all of their elders in the middle, and they trained their warrior caste. Their warrior caste, they don't gender differentiate. Their warrior caste circles them. They're trained to kill. But then there's 4 alphas, there's 4 silverbacks. Doesn't say gender, 4 silverbacks. And they actually, just like ravens, get at the 4 quarters of the group as the group moves. As the lion comes in, one of the baboons from the quarters will confront the lion while the other 3 circle the lion until the lion's scared off, because there's no way a lion can herd baboons. Baboons are just fucking awesome people. You with me? So the initial concept of Gevurah, which is associated with Mars, was the defender of the people, the defender of your clan. This is the place where your puppy who attacks the door, whoever's knocking on the door, and your puppy barks, your puppy is defending you and their family. They are Gevuric. Good old Gevuric puppy. So once that's established there, and the person concerned is established a form of martial environment to protect the territory that they're in, where they've locked up their grain, you then end up with a group of people who are discussing this. And that discussion is here in Chesed. Chesed, of course, is associated with Jupiter, and Jupiter has got to do with the concept of education, social standing. It's also got to do with religion, the idea of emancipation in some areas, but specifically to do with growth. So that as the population around the new magnate grows, because that's where a fortress is formed, and of course the king is the one who locked up his grain in the first place, and he's got all his guardians protecting him, and nowadays called a military. And there's villages formed around the outside of all that, which is where everybody trades, etc., and interrelates and interreacts from there. But being Jupiter, Jupiter is the planet of expansion. I'm getting to the point. We move from there. Then of course, we mentioned, as I mentioned before, Binah is associated with Saturn. Saturn is a planet that defines your limitations. Everybody keeping up? Groovy. Now, where we are, as far as an evolution is concerned, is between Chesed and Binah. All of which along the serpent line, or the dragon line, or the lightning flash, as it's also called, transits art, D-A'-apostrophe-A-T-H, which is associated with the planet Pluto, which is called the Great Dissolver. These planets are called ambassadors of the galaxy. All your outer planets are Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. They're known as ambassadors of the galaxy. And what Uranus hasn't destroyed completely, Pluto will. Pluto turns it into its etheric sense of self. Now, what happens with, we don't know Pluto. Pluto is, even among astrologers, considered to be the most further in, the most inaccessible. What's happening here evolutionary wise is we're moving, if we could be said to be moving, because all things move from seed to flat to branch, to root, to stem, to leaf, to flower, to bud, to flower, to fruit, to seed. Yeah, so it goes through this cycle. Life goes through these cycles. Okay, every tree goes through these cycles. This is an area which is a shocker. And why is it a shocker? Because the art represents something that is not known. Just like Pluto, the art represents that which is extraordinary. It's where something becomes known that's never been known before. Okay. So who here was born before 1940? Anybody? Didn't think so. Okay. So we'll just stick with the fact that we're a certain generation in a sea of shifting baseline syndrome, which we did talk about last week. So you know what that is. Jupiter is a planet of expansion. What do we know about our society? Too many fucking people. And they're all getting fat. And there's too many products on the shelves. And there's too much waste. And there's too many piles and piles of detritus in Manila where the children are dancing over the top of all the mercury. And everybody's trying to get the next thing up, the next thing up, and the next thing up. And you're known to be, the bigger your house, the better. Isn't that the way the saying goes? If you're living in a mud hut, you're cheap. But what's also happening here with Chesed, which is associated with Jupiter, the planet of expansion, people are getting fatter and fatter and fatter. And they're given more and more and more information. You see, this is where we are. So right now we're transiting to art on the way to Binah, which is contraction, which is security cameras, control, manipulation, registration, keeping it under wraps, keeping it in a certain kind of a paradigm. Everything has to be fitted, and things are getting smaller and smaller and smaller in Binah, which is where groups become fractioned and fractured and fractured and fractured and fractured. People stop being people. They become men and women, socialites, celebrities, LGBTQI, dwarves, people in wheelchairs, people with disabilities, people with mental illnesses, people who work in HR. Can you hear the divisionism? Okay, so that is Binah, planet of contraction. But as Binah says, I am not limitation. I define your limitations. And mathematically, in the dictionary, a limit is a thing that you look like you're going towards, but you can never reach. An athlete, for example, who's seeking to go 1 second faster when they do a sprint that has ever been done before. Okay, so evolutionary wise, that's where we are. Contractions, you could call these safes. You know, is where you close everything and you shut the fucking prison door. But then something comes like a fucking rocket from art, and it's COVID, people. In your lifetime, this is meant to be. This is natural. This is what generates the tree. This is the quickening. And we are experiencing that now. I am super excited. This is why all the hyperbole that's occurring across media is completely irrelevant. Vaccinated or non-vaccinated is completely irrelevant. It's how we really focus ourselves through this process. This process could last 2.5 million years. This process could last another 10,500 years. We don't know when the next generation of people are that will experience thalidomide, that will experience the 1919 Spanish flu, for example. We don't know the next experience of the so-called Black Plague. These are all art. So these could all, you could, if you wanted to, if you had 10 lifetimes, sit down and with what you know of history, write down the number of regenerations that have occurred historically. And fascinatingly, Genesis, the book of Genesis, marks them. For example, the book associated with Noah and the flood, there's just a few people left and they spread out across the world. Eden with Adam and Eve, just a few people left and they spread out across the world. The idea of Sodom and Gomorrah, you've got a few people left and they got spread out. What each of these stories does is say, when it gets too big, life will make it smaller. And we begin again. Now, this is what happens when you theoretically fall as a fruit from your father's tree. You seem smaller. When you start to learn anything, it seems overwhelming. And the more comfortable you become with the wisdom or the knowledge or the practicalities of making a fucking box, in the end, you can call yourself a carpenter. Do you understand what I'm getting to so far? This is mysticism, people. You can't work with tarot unless you understand the mysteries, at least a little bit, of where this has come from, to show you a more expansive picture of yourselves and your lives and what's actually going around you, so that you don't buy into the bullshit. Okay. From this particular sphere known as Binah, we go across. Okay, this is where the cruciform cross comes in, that was mentioned earlier by Danger. I think it was Danger mentioned the cruciform cross. You see that there? That's called the cruciform cross. This triad at the top leading down, it's called the cruciform cross. This Chokmah, that path, believe it or not, between Binah and Chokmah is associated with the Empress card, or the seer in the newer book, but it's traditionally called the Empress card. You right? You with me? You got that? Okay. The interesting part about the Empress card, each of the major arcana, each of the pictographic cards has a letter associated with that. Remember we said this is the art here, first door, first earth? So that the letter associated with the Empress card path is Dalet, Dalet, D-A-L-E-T-H, which means door. It's an Empress card, fecundity, sensuality, eating really nourishing food, licking the salt off somebody's body, patting a horse. All of that is associated with Venus and the Empress card. Yes. So that particular line there is also associated with Binah, with Netzach, this little circle here that's connected with Venus, and the same thing of sensuality and eroticism and beauty. And that can be a vast, vast old growth forest, a savanna. Yes, it could also be the skin you've spun off of a fox and used for your children's hands, as they do in Mongolia with the eagles. So that sphere there, which is Chokmah, it's associated with Uranus or Uranus, and that's called the sphere of the zodiac. I think it was Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. How's that for dragging it out of the fucking archive somewhere? Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young wrote a song called After the Gold Rush. Anybody remember that song? If not, have a little listen. The song itself is symbolic of
Neil
that
Young.
journey.
It was Neil Young that did that one.
Flying Mother Nature's silver seed to a new home. Okay, so I am one person who knows that there is great joy in what's happening. In the midst of devastation is always the expansion into the next phase through the recognition and acknowledgement of what's actually happening. We don't move if we think of it as just man-made. We don't move if we think that somebody like fucking George Bush or whatever has got all the power. We don't move. We don't understand the groundswell. The groundswell is the imminence of this whole thing. The continuous imminence, this vast forest of this whole thing. Then what happens come this area Keter, which is associated with Neptune? Fucking nobody knows. I don't know. Nobody knows. You can have read about Neptune and think you fucking know, but unless you've actually lived through the evolutionary process, you're not going to know. It's all guesswork. Now, once we look at all this, I'll get you to do something. We're going to just finish off with you starting to do something else again. Borrowing the pen. Borrowing the pen. Okay, so I'll leave that to the side for a moment. We'll come back to this before we finish. Can you see that? Make it clearer. Can you see that? Yeah? Can you see that? Okay, I'm just going to do something else. I'm just going to this is rough. So I kind of did a little one there, yeah? Yeah, okay, so I'm going to take any circle. And I'm going to do another one off it. And then I'll take any circle of that. And I'll do another one off it. Okay. You're going to be doing this. You're going to be doing this. Okay. And then what you're going to do is realize that the whole thing is in one circle. And that one circle is called Malkut. So there are 10 spheres with a potential 11, all inside of one. This is the pattern inside of the seed. There's only ever one. Ones and zeros make up a binary communication tool that powers all computer systems on a worldwide level. Ones and zeros, people, have a look. Have a look. We are looking at a computerized, technological, advanced system that could be thousands of years before it actualizes itself. But it's also potentially thousands of years in any direction from a center. And nobody knows where that center is. So all you've got is you. And that makes you the center of this image. It also makes you every other sphere on this image, but it specifically makes you Malkut. Because in a weird kind of way, there's nothing manifest prior to Malkut. So all the rest of this is bullshit. Even though I can look at it as an evolutionary process, the truth is, I'm still here. I'm just writing and the fucking computer's telling me what I should and shouldn't do. Oh, there it is. Don't need that. Okay, so. What are you doing? Go away. Okay, so, excuse me, just done a thing. Right, so that top sphere, or that most inner sphere, Keta is Atziluth. Keta is Atziluth, A-T-Z-I-L-U-T-H. This is what we worked on last week. Yeah, Keta is Atziluth, A-T-Z-U-L-I-L-U-T-H. Yeah? This whole central area here is yet the Atziluth, Keta, Bina, and Chokmah form Braya. B-R-I-A-H. Remember that? All still in the thinking process. It's all doing the mathematical process. It's all trying to work it out by finding your research. This whole central area is called Yetzirah. They're the ingredients that make up. Each of us has got things like skin cells and hearts and lungs and mitochondria. Yeah, that's what that is in a body. In an environment, it is a mother forest that's got nothing chopped down. So Ezekiel's idea of destroying the Asherah tree didn't work, did it? Because we're all here. Do you get what I'm getting about that historical information? We're still all here. So therefore, it was not possible that Ezekiel destroyed the Asherah. Okay. This one here, the most outer aspect of this is Assiah, which is also / Malkut, because it's the only place anything is manifest. This is when the seed sprouts those first 2 little leaves and the first tiny little threads of roots. It's when the seed cracks open a little bit to show that there's nothing inside except forever. Nothing except forever. But if I'm looking at this with tarot, and I've got cards on each of these places, which I will do, okay, I'm interested in what's going on if a magician card falls in the sphere of Tiferet. What's happening if a person's got the devil card in the sphere of Yesud? What kind of cancer have they got? Have they got cancer of the bowel? Have they got cancer of the uterus? Have they got sexually transmitted disease? Have they got AIDS? There's your shoulders. There's your head. There's your throat. There's your gut. There's your genitals. There's your fucking knees and feet. This is called the body of Adam Kadmon. We mentioned this last week. The body of Adam Kadmon, that's this. And there are also 3 aspects. When we look at the body, this top section, which is going to be, we're almost finished for the day. I'm fucking running out of steam. This top section is called the Neshama, Neschamah. Where's Ari? Thank you, Ari. This entire middle section includes part of Yesud, not all of it. I'll leave you to speculate whether it's the bottom or the top, or maybe just a consideration of Yesud. It's called the Ruach, R-U-A-C-H. And this one section at the bottom, which includes probably just a tiny little lick of Yesud, is called the Nefesh, N-E-P-H-E-S-H, Nefesh. Together, that forms the body of Adam, or the eternal tribe. We said this, we told you last week what that's called. The eternal tribe, Adam Kadmon is red earth, the eternal tribe. Knowing this first, before you go putting fucking cards on the top of it, is meant to open this up. Each of these here is also associated with a number, but the numbers could be anywhere. For the sake of what we're going to do next week, which is part of this, of numerology, for the sake of it, we're going to say that Malkut is number 1. Yesud is number 2. Hud is 3. Netzach is 4. Tiferet is 5. Geburah is 6. Hesed is 7. Binah is 8. Chokmah is 9. Keta is 10. And art is a speculative 11. A speculative 11, because we don't know everything. No matter what we think we know, we don't know everything. So when we get on to doing numerology, you are going to need all this. You are also going to need it when you're working. I call this map in the newer book, the Stargate, because most people call it the tree of life. And when they call it the tree of life, they just see it as up and down. They fuck up every time, every which way you look, all over the internet. Have a look this week. Now, Kabbalah is spelled in several different ways. It's C-A-B-A-L-A. Call you in, Ari, to write these down. Kabbalah. K-A-B-A-L-A. K-A-B-B-A-L-A-H. QBLH, QBBLH, QABBALAH. It's also called Otzchim, OTZCHIIM. Double I. Thank you. So any which one of them you go looking up, you're going to find something deeply occidentally religious and outrageously limiting. But we are talking about systems that want to control other systems. And it's actually silly. It's so silly. There's nothing and anybody can control anything. This is why the idea of making a box, so that you could come to the conclusion or the understanding that the box is making you, or each part of the box is coming together collaboratively for a reciprocal community gathering. If we place anything in a state of being more important than any other thing, and by the way, the word thing is a Nordic word that means a gathering of warriors. I think you ought to know that about any word, that any expression called with TH in it. This is why in Ireland, for example, which was never conquered by the Norse people, the person will go, I'm talking about me toot. And I'm going, what? Me toot, me teat are giving me a hard time. My friend Helen in Galway. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. She said, me teat. Because an unconquered people can't say TH. For example, certain Londoners will say bothered and thing. And we put them down. We go, you arrogant, you fucking losers, you undignified plebeians, whatever. You can't say thing. Just means they haven't been conquered. Because our glottis works through the connectedness it's got with the weaving of many languages. It works. It won't work properly if we haven't got them, but it will work differently with people who haven't been conquered. Therefore, anybody who speaks a second language besides the language which is your so-called native language, kudos. But this is where we're going to stop this week, because it's getting a bit on the late side. Any questions you've got, please let me know. One other thing that I'd like you to imagine. This is very significant. Atziluth, we could also call number 1. Because if you wanted to, you could screw this up in a fucking ball and throw it for your cat. It actually needs to be. That's kabbalah. Okay, so Keta is also called 1. Chokmah is considered as 2. And Bina is considered as 3. But I want to show you something. That's 1. That's 2. When it becomes a closed system, it becomes life. Life is possible because life is not possible until a system closes back in on itself. So 1 is energetic, 2 is energetic only, but when a third factor is involved, you have life. And that could be a human infant, or it could be a vast galaxy. You with me? And that's called neshama on the tree. So that involves Bina and Chokmah and Keta, yes? Just so you know. Because when we get into shapes, and you've got a lot of 4s in your chart, if you've got a lot of 4s in your chart next week and you see this box, you're going to wonder whether or not it traps you or whether it supports you. Because if it supports you, it's the strongest fucking thing ever. If it traps you, it's because you're caught in dogma. We've got a lot to cover next week. That's all we've got time for today, people. Any questions at the end of the day? Any quick questions? We've got 5 minutes for questions.
You'll post it up as soon as you can, so I can re-go over it.
Yeah, and can
Obviously.
we have access to the site too? Some of us aren't on your Facebook site.
None of this. This is the difficulty with this is why we call it. I apologize, but this is why we call it the advanced tarot class. Okay, because you can't get this from books. You can't get it from books. I never learned this from books. I came close to writing it in the first book, tarot book, and the second one, advanced tarot, but it's not in any book. This is an oral learning. You're supposed to remember.
I think she meant in the video. Can we look at it again? That's all.
Yeah, when
I'm going to put the video up for the week.
Unedited though.
Unedited. I'm just going to fuck it up there.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
And could some of us have access to the Facebook site? Because I think a lot of us are not on it as yet.
Okay, I don't know why you're not, but it's like, just let me know. Just send me a private message, and that's pretty much it.
We tried to open the link, but we were told we can't.
But what I'd like you to do between now and then is not think of the Facebook page. If you want to come in, you just got to let me know that you're not in. Okay, I'm fine with you yelling at me, Kasia. I'm fine with that. I'm loving it a little bit. I'm like, oh, I won't fire up. But what's all? Oh, look at Lily doing a snuggle down there. I do it. Look, yeah, us two next. Please draw the diagram in your grimoire after we finish the work today. Please also make a note of every title, name, number so far. Please do not precede the work by thinking you know what's what afterwards, because we're going to cover that. Yeah, just one thing at a time, and just suck the fuck out of every single bit each week, because when we get around to tarot, this will have worked itself through your system. It really will. And then, for example, in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time, when I'm talking about Netzach, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. If I say, for example, there's an eight of Pentacles just turned up Netzach, what's that mean? You're going to go, oh, that person's a prostitute. Yeah, okay, that's a good sex worker. Hey, right, that's fine. It could also be somebody who sells lingerie, or somebody who sells Lamborghinis as well, because they're still sex symbols. But if it falls in the sphere of Netzach, you're going to know that's what it's got to do. Yeah? If there's a 7 of Cups, it's like somebody who sort of like gets in their imagination and jerks off to a computer screen, for example. Okay, all kinds of possibilities, but unless this original information sinks into you like a really nice massage oil, the rest of it is just going to be surface shit, and you won't be able to pull on. And what happens back? Oh, that's the scary bit. The scary bit is something is listening to you learning.
Well, that's a nice drop in the ocean, isn't it?
So, Laura, I have a question in regards to that.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in my original notes from 2001, when we were looking at the art at that point in time, we also had Chiron listed.
I've moved it. I've changed my mind.
I wanted to know. Oh, really?
Yes.
I got to update my grimoires, huh?
You've got to update your grimoire. Yeah.
Well, you also
work out why I've changed it.
You also had the pentagram there, which I don't know whether you were going to bring later on.
No, we'll discuss that just for a second. If you draw it, if I draw it, okay, just for the sake of it. I do that drawing. Okay. Most people think that's like a symbol of witches, yeah? That's okay. What the cool people wear. But you know what it is? It's called the 5 ellipses of Venus. And what it actually really looks like
Can you use a dark pen so that we can actually see it if you're drawing, like a dark one, like a texter?
Like a
or
Sharpie texter.
Oh, Sharpie.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's what you need.
It's happening. This is when it's like, see, just while I was waiting, if I was to do that sort of, and you didn't know that it was a piece of paper, it could look a line, could look like a line, couldn't it?
Yeah.
But when I do that, it's completely different. So if I was to put a dot on the piece, say for example, thank you, darling. Say for example, I was to, just very briefly. Okay, so let me just do this mind fuck with you. So that's the word it. IT. Okay. That's how I've written it. And I've written it like that on purpose. Okay, because you see that little dot? Like the dot in the middle of the page. If I was to turn that letter I that way, and I look down the middle of it, it would be that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If I was to get that line there that crosses the T and turn it on its side and look down it, it would be that, wouldn't it? So what's in the very middle of the T? It's that, isn't it? If I got that line there and I was to look down it to the middle of it, it would be that. But that there could be that, when in actuality, it could also be that. Mad genius moment? Is it? I'm actually not fucking with you. It seems like what the fuck is all on, but I'm not. Okay, I'm going to draw Venus again.
It's almost 2 a.m. here, so anything you say will feel like you're fucking with us.
That's Venus. How is that possible? Because I'm closer in space to this. It's exactly the same drawing, but one of them is so far out into the space that the cycle looks like a point. Can you see? I'm so far in space that the cycle looks like a point, but when you get closer, you can see that the ellipses around the sun. So these are the 5 ellipses of Venus around the sun. Okay. Many things that you may have been taught are modern, they're recent, and they come out of that fucktard called Gerald Gardner, or the people like Eliphas Levi, Robert Flood, Alistair Crowley, Arthur Edward Waite, blah, 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 the old boys club. Okay. Nobody needs that. And nobody needs to know that this is hidden information. For example, somebody earlier talked about I can't see you, but that doesn't matter. Yes, it was you, Lily. You were in the room and you're talking about being a box. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. That's really, I was thrilled when you said that. And I'll explain that particularly. What was I up to with that? Okay, with the whole concept of geometry, the mathematics of architecture was kept hidden like a really powerful secret by the Masonic orders. Because in most Indigenous communities, except for the longhouse, they're roundhouses.
Yeah.
The idea of the straight line in geometry started a form of madness. And it's really interesting. What's his name? John Young, who I put up John Young's video called Earth Talk for you to have a look at during the week. John Young trained with the Kalahari. And the Kalahari, when a house was built nearby where the Kalahari lived, the elders went into absolute horror because everybody who goes into a square house comes out mad.
Yep.
There is something intrinsically problematic about living in a coffin or in a box, isn't there? And the boxes that separate us are really terrible. I think of the towers here in Melbourne. They're upright coffins. They're just boxes, 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 boxes. Everything stacks well in a box. Nothing is organic. Nothing can fall naturally if it's in a box. It's enclosed. It's contained. It's controlled. Yes, except for the fact that we then have a tsunami, and that fucks that up. Yes. So I'm watching humanity at the moment attempting to control COVID. COVID is a life form. COVID has their time to level out humanity, because if we took the concept of Pachamama, and I do, no matter what anybody thinks I do, I'll take this first, the idea of Earth being, some people will call it the Gaia hypothesis. Pachamama is a South American word for Earth Mother. There are many, many word names for this, but without recognition of reciprocity in how we interrelate with Earth, if we don't interrelate well, we become chesedic, which is what's happening on that tree, where we just get fatter and fatter and fatter, because nobody's got to hunt their food, do they? Or some of us do. Get fatter and fatter and fatter, and when we get fatter and fatter and fatter, we get sicker and sicker and sicker, and all of a sudden Pachamama goes, we're just going to bring about a bit of a virus, which is, we have every virus that we could imagine on the blockchain of our DNA and RNA. They're always there all the time, and sometimes they bloom because it's the season of their blooming. And this fear of death is just odd, because nothing dies. And this is also what I'm hoping you get your heads around, or you get, that makes sense, because what will happen with Kabbalah, it's a beautiful phenomenon. It starts to burrow into you. What I'm teaching here is going to start to infiltrate your dreams, affect the way you touch things, affect the way you look at things, affect the way you think about what you're being taught. It starts to burrow into you and transform you from the center out, so that you'll come to not fear things like COVID. It's like, this is even my daughter yesterday. She said, what is this about vaccination? I said, vaccination or no vaccination, what's it got to do with you? I don't tell you who I fuck. I'm not about to tell you whether I get what I get a needle for, or whether or not I go and change my diaper every day. It's not necessarily anybody else's business, but it's becoming a big populist thing. And that again is too Hasidic to get me. It's too expansive. It's just, it crushes us, which has been bringing us in. It crushes us. We're crushed by too much information. We're crushed by by this continuous pressure, and by the scrutiny, and the police all dressed in black with black armor. But mate, I can tell you, no shit, this was predicted in a book that I wrote called Genesis. Every step along the way, I got from one of these particular, because each one of these places on the tree, it's gone now, it's too late. Each one of those places on the tree, thank you, has, each one of those circles has 4 worlds. And with each of those worlds is almost like in another whole world, so that you may have 10 Sephirot, and each of them is made up of 4 worlds, and therefore you have 40 worlds. But if you add them, if you've read, I mean, anybody got hold of Death Forever yet? You got it, Tanya? Okay. Death Forever talks, you got it, Artemis? The Death Forever talks about light. The number of light is 10 to the 40th. Just let that sink in. It's 10 with a little 40 up the top.
Wow.
That's this. Nobody knows where this science came from. When they try and box it in and control it through a religion, they're not understanding that this is life itself. herself, themself, the whole works. 10 to the 40th. As if there's 4 worlds, and there's 4 worlds that's from Atziluth, Bariah, Yetzirah, and Assiah in each one of those Sephirot. And each one of those Sephirot has 10 more. And each one of those 10 has 4 worlds, and each one of those 4 worlds has 10 more Sephirot. You're looking at eternity.
Regeneration.
Why
Regeneration. Every cell in your body. You're looking at the moment sperm and ovum complete. You're looking at the first time a cell separates. And you're also looking at the full fucking tree. And this is where the understanding of ancestral knowledge from an indigenous people is so important. And so is non-literate culture. This capacity, Kabbalah means from mouth to ear. So I can't teach you by giving you a book. What's the fucking point of having these workshops? If I can't remember and know all this, I know all this. I know about this, but I've been working with it almost my whole life. And I didn't know about this when I first started learning. What happens after a period of time is that this particular entity called Kabbalah begins to teach you itself. Something happens and you start to then think around the edges of the corners in difference to the way you might have thought about it before if nobody showed you or nobody told you. And when that happens, the trigger to do with you as a movable, malleable capacity to read cards is just part of this. But everything will change beforehand because you're all here, because you're all in a collective, because you can ask each other questions, because you'll learn to remember this. Please remember every bit of it. And if you need to talk with among yourselves, do so, but without knowing each other too much, because at the moment, like I said before, please don't know each other. Yeah, we'll get to feel each other, but we can never know each other. But so if we start to read for each other, at least there'll be a slight, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, because we're not in the same room with each other, but I'm up for the experiment. I'm up for the whole worldwide thing that we're doing right now. Okay, so please learn as much as you can of this pattern for next week. Yep. Any other questions?
Laura, can I ask, do you have any suggestions of, like, I want to read more about this Ezekiel story because I'm just trying to, like, I don't know, I feel like there's more that I would like to know if there's any.
What's your question?
Do you have any books or anything that you recommend?
No.
Or, no?
This is word of mouth. You won't get it from the book.
Yeah, but like, I mean, the Ezekiel story in particular, like, you've been suggesting books here and there. So.
Yeah, but that won't have to do with anything I'm teaching you as such.
Mm-hmm.
Their ways of thinking, they're also going to affect you by the way other people have thought. For example, the concept of schooling, the movie Schooling the World by Arnie Deaconess. Did I mention that one before?
No.
Last week. Ari, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Are you able to find the movie Schooling the World, the link to that?
Okay, I'll have a look.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll put it in.
Thanks, Ari.
He's getting it for us.
And so you touched on the little drop in the ocean about someone is listening.
About what?
Someone is listening.
Yes.
Yeah. So, any advice there?
Well, life is listening. Right?
Isn't that the
Life
reciprocity?
is not necessarily what you think it is. It's not us and everything else. There's more to it, and it does come down to no one can get close to it. And I think the closest a person can get is if they do DMT. As an example. There's that link. You can grab hold of that link. Thank you, Ari. So that your thinking is affecting, is flooding your body. Your synapses are all flooding your body with different hormones in different ways, And don't think for a moment that you haven't got on your knee, you've got a cell on your knee. In that cell, there are vast numbers of atoms. Each of those atoms has a nucleus. Each of those nuclei have electrons going around them in vast quantities. We don't know if those electrons actually are the ellipses of planets around a sun. And if one of the ellipses of those planets around that sun contains this Earth with us on it. That's what this is. So when you scratch your knee, you could be destroying an entire universe. Doesn't matter. So when you eat the kangaroo that you found on the side of the road, and you gut and you cut her, and you've checked that she's got no joeys, and you make sure that she's good food, and you take off the leg at the back, you are eating the eternity of every kangaroo that ever lived. You see, this is nourishment. This is why it's so important to, yes, we honor our food. We honor our food because we are brothers and sisters to this food. We are family. And this is really, really significant. This is why the idea of fucking racism is so hysterical, because I just got to lift up my skin and boom.
There you are.
And it's the same with the idea of beauty. It's the same with the idea of one of the most beautiful people I have ever met, a woman named Sarah McQueenie. Sarah McQueenie came to one of my workshops in 1980, and it was in Blackwood, I think, New South Wales, in Victoria, before I moved up north. No, it was 1979, 1980. Sarah McQueenie was born with the experience of spina bifida. So Sarah McQueenie walks with sticks, yes? Everybody's laid out, there's 20 people laid out on the floor in this old abandoned church where we're doing the work the weekend. And I was putting everybody through a relaxation process. And to get them through the relaxation process, I got them all to tense up parts of their body and then relax them. Tense up, everybody all over the floor. You've got to tense up your hands, and tense up your hands. Everybody in the room does this on the floor. And Sarah McQueenie goes, and I went, who the fuck are you? Well, Sarah McQueenie is one of the 4 of us who went through these Kabbalistic ceremonial rituals in 1989 that defined the rest of our lives, because this work will take you into tarot. It can take you down many other areas as well. And what we came to realize was that there is multitudes listening to us, and they're not humans we know human to be, and they're not necessarily flesh the way we know flesh to be. But everybody knows there's no empty space between us. Everybody knows it's chockers. And everybody knows energetically, everybody's communicating at all times. Be careful of the people that you keep company with. Even sometimes the books you read, I can read some books and they start to put me in a really bad mood. I'm going, what the fuck is that? It's the book I'm reading. We alter with every experience of every person that's around us, that's beside us. We pick it up. We don't know that we're picking it up. We wonder why we get sick or why we stay healthy. This is all mixed in together here. But it's too much for today, and everybody's got to go away. Bye-bye.
Love you, Law. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.